He said you've never. It's like that's what he was saying.
That's yours.
Yeah, that's actually really high level. That's high level shit.
Thanks.
I feel like
Come on, Kelly.
like Royce Morris would have been great, but he's
All right.
That's who Bobby had.
Right.
Probably would have been.
Okay, someone needs to call the lawyers. Are you joining or you're not joining? You're not joining. Come on, Kelly. All right, goodbye. Someone needs to call the lawyers. All right. Are you joining or you're not joining? You're not joining. Come on, Kelly. What's the channel on Facebook called, Jeff? I can share it on my pages too.
The home group page is That Other Side of Information, or you can find it at Our Revolution, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Our Revolution. I like that. That's nice. That Other Side of Information. Yep, there you are. I see you. All right.
Other Side of Information, or you can find it at Our Revolution, Pennsylvania.
All right, so I have to ask Jeff, are you related to the Kennedys, or do you just happen to have the last name Kennedy?
Well, I will answer that. And this is the fun
this is the pre-program
production part that all the folks on Facebook get to see
the fun part
every week. This is the fun part. Is that? Do you have the volume up on your end?
No, I don't. It's on my headphones.
Okay. Yeah, because it's reverberating. That might be me too. It's reverberating through. That could have been me. So I apologize.
And what was the other page? Revolution, Pennsylvania?
Our Revolution, PA.
Okay, thank you.
Could have been me reverberating through as well. I thought I had it turned down, and I didn't. So. Okay.
Policy and Legislation Discussion Group, Independence for Progressive Action.
So we are going to go on 101 right. So we are formally starting right now. I think. I don't seem to be connecting to 101. Interesting. Well, for those of you on Facebook and all of our various platforms on Facebook who are used to seeing us at this time on a Sunday evening, welcome to everyone watching on all the various platforms who are used to seeing this shining face on a red face apparently on a Facebook Sunday. This is the Kennedy Effect for 12 July 2020. Welcome all. We're thrilled to see you on a steamy, hot Sunday, July afternoon. This is supposed to be our first Sunday on the Hot 101 website and app, although I appear to be having some sort of issue connecting to it as I break the fourth wall, as I usually do. Hopefully the program will get itself together. I'm watching it right now, having connection issues. I, of course, tested this only 2, 3, 25, 30, 65 times before tonight, and it worked flawlessly. now I am having connecting issues. I'm watching the program as the software program right now as I am speaking to all of you. It's terribly exciting as you watch me do a bit of this pre-production work. There we seem to be connected now. So a bright and happy welcome to everyone on the Hot 101 main website and app. Welcome to my debut streaming of the Kennedy Effect for, thank you, Shavonnia, for welcome to the debut program on the main website and app of hot101.net. Welcome to the Kennedy Effect for 12 July 2020, your home for information, education, and engagement. Something new on the Hot 101 website. We're thrilled to be here, and we're happy that you are here with us. A real opportunity to bring something new and different to Hot 101. I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to be here. I would not be here without DJ Lexus, DJ Earl, and of course my friend, mentor, spirit guide, partner in crime and politics and all things spiritual and educational, April Riddick. And I'm just thrilled to be here. Not the most polished and formal opening, but I'm just excited and thrilled and perhaps, to be honest, even perhaps a little bit nervous to be here. But let's jump into the program and get ready. So for wherever you're with us, listening or watching on Facebook, welcome. You are welcome here from wherever you come on the political spectrum, from whatever opinions you may have, whatever you believe in, agree with, whatever spectrum you come from, you're welcome here. You are honored here, and we're happy that you're here. Joining me this week is not the announced guest, but a welcome, happy, privileged, honored guest is with us anyway, and that's Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson. I have this wonderful, exciting bio that she was nice enough to send me. It's brilliant. and you get to listen to me read for a while. I'm sure you're all terribly excited about listening to me read, but it is a really tremendous bio that she sent me, and I of course forgot to silence my phone because I'm playing producer here while I'm at it as well. First off, let me just tell everybody on Facebook, let me do just a little bit more pre-production work because you're all terribly excited to listen to that. We are thrilled to have you wherever you are watching on Facebook or listening in the background right now. I'm glad that you're here. We share the program to about 30 different pages and groups, but it is only at the main group page, the home for the program, that other side of information where I will see your questions and comments. Your questions and comments are welcome. I want to see them. Our guest wants to see them. If you have questions for us, we want to see them. I will only see them at the main group page, that other side of information. If you are watching at some other place, you're welcome to stay there and watch from there, but it is only at the main group page where I will see your questions and comments. So thank you for that. Our guest is Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson, a proud native of York, Pennsylvania. I almost said New York. Oh. Why would I have done that?
Or the old York.
Yeah, the old York, the original. The original York is across the pond. She currently serves as Chief of Staff for the Democratic Pennsylvanian State Senator. She formerly served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, leading the effort for statewide legalization of recreational marijuana. I actually attended the tour that the Lieutenant Governor came when he came to the steel stacks here in Bethlehem.
Oh, nice.
Which was an interesting tour. It was a really good night. It was a very informational night. I hope that if you were anywhere within the Commonwealth that you attended that tour. It was a really, really good series of events throughout the Commonwealth. I believe you did one in every county, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, in some counties we even did a few more. I think Pittsburgh we did 2, and Philadelphia we did 3. So.
And also reforming the clemency system, particularly for those serving life in prison. In 2018, she ran as the youngest Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in Pennsylvania's 10th district, which covers York, Dauphin, and Cumberland counties, drawing nationwide attention in the Huffington Post, CNN, international news outlets, and other reputable sources. Shavonnia came short of the nomination by only 500 votes. That's an honest bio when you put that in there. Let's just be fair about that. Shavonnia previously served in the Obama White House as the advisor and assistant to Sean Donovan, the Secretary of Office of Management and Budget, where she helped maintain the $4.1 trillion budget. Before her time at the White House, Shavonnia worked for U.S. Senator Robert Casey in Washington. She was cared for by a loving foster family until later moving under the custody of her parental grandparents. Shavonnia was raised by her grandmother, Reverend Roberta Johnson, who has served for over 35 years in the prison ministry. Her late grandfather was a veteran, Richard Johnson. Shavonnia comes from a strong lineage of Army and Air Force veterans who have served in World War I, World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, the Vietnam War, and the Korean War. In 2017, graduate of George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where she received her master's degree in U.S. foreign policy with a focus on an extremely important area of the world. Perhaps we'll get into that now, given the border tensions between India and China and the Himalayan border. India, Pakistan, and the Middle East. She's also a 2014 graduate of Georgetown University, where she received her bachelor's in science and international affairs, becoming the first person in her family to go to college. She's a board member for Pennsylvania Federation of Democratic Women, Pennsylvania Young Democrats, Planned Parenthood Keystone, the PA Black Caucus, PA Latino Caucus, and an alum of Emerge Pennsylvania. And of course, in her free time, as if there is any after reading this kind of bio, she enjoys traveling domestically and internationally, something that not enough Americans do, I don't believe, teaching various styles of Indian and Arab dance, which I will not ask you to display, you're off the hook, and speaks 5 languages and has traveled to over 20 countries. And if you could name those countries in alphabetical order by the order of time that you travel to them, I will put you on the spot for that. Anyway, Shavonnia, welcome. First off, am I pronouncing it correct? Is it Shavonnia?
It's Shavonnia. It
Shavonnia.
rhymes with
So I've
lasagna.
I've only done it wrong about 50 times already. So put me to task for that. I owe you for that. And welcome to the program.
Thank you. It rhymes with lasagna, so now you'll always remember it. You know,
Now I will.
lasagna.
And you will always remember me, so that whenever we get past this pandemic and we're allowed to actually have, state committee meetings and big black tie events and all those wonderful things in person again, you can go, that's the dummy who said my name wrong 65 times on the introduction of me into the program. So Shavonnia, welcome. Extreme thanks to you for jumping into the program at a very late hour. My scheduled guest was Cole Goodman. He is doing the Lord's work at a very important protest day in Dauphin County that got changed today. And you were kind enough to accept my invitation to join the program today, especially on a very important day as we make our debut audio only on hot101.net and the hot101.net app. And a special shout out to the folks who are listening to us there today. So thank you very, very, very much for being here today. It means a lot to me, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for allowing me to join your show, especially on this debut. I'm really excited for you in April. So thanks for having me.
Even though I read that bio, if you're a regular watcher of the program, I know for the folks who are new to the program on Hot 101, this will be new to them. But if you're a regular part of the program on Facebook, you know that I tend to start every program the same way. And I'm not going to break that tradition now. So even though we read this bio, I want to ask you the same I tend to ask every guest. Who is Shavonnia, and how did you get here?
Wow, that's a great question. Like I said, awesome question. I think for myself, I kind of describe myself mostly based on my background and my upbringing, and then also on, what I'm doing now and the changes I hope to bring to my community. For myself, what's not really mentioned in my bio, but it's kind of there, is I was raised by a foster family for the majority of my my early childhood. I was raised by them pretty much until I hit 2 years old. At that time, that's when my grandparents found out about me, and they wanted custody of me, and so did my foster family. And so what the courts actually ruled is that I would spend 1 week with my mother, 1 week with my foster family, 1 week with my father, and 1 week with my grandparents until about the age of 10. So from 2 years old to 10 years old, I went week to week living with a different family until I pretty much had a stable house by, the age of 10. This being said, I've always had a great relationship with my foster family. My parents and I, of course, we're still in communication, but my grandparents have really definitely been the backbone of, I guess, who I am today. My grandparents were the ones who were really interested in traveling and really interested in knowing what's happening in your community. They were raised in segregated America. My grandmother had to take a bus 30 miles each way to go to the nearest all Black school in Maryland because she was African American and there was segregation at that time. And she always stressed the importance of having an education, the importance of, knowing what's going on in your community. She would go out and tirelessly register people to vote. And same with my grandfather. They will always say, how we lost friends and how they lost friends and how we've lost family members fighting for the African American and the people of color's right to vote. And so that was ingrained in me. And I remember when I turned 18 years old, my grandma woke me up right away. It was like, here you go. And made me fill out that voter registration form. And she was like, oh yeah, by the way, happy birthday. That was the later thing. But first, like, you gotta register to vote. And so, I never really realized how much that really played into my character, I guess, until I had the opportunity to go to college. And my beginnings of going week to week between a different family and often growing up on or sometimes below the poverty line, really played into my empathy and really expanded my world views that says, there are people who are struggling and who need help. And I've never forgotten that. So being the first person to go to college, I went to Georgetown University, as you said. It was something, honestly, I never thought I would do. After I graduated high school, I wanted to get a job. I wanted to join the workforce. But the mother of my best friend at the time, she said, you should go to college. And so she's the one that sat me down, made a list of colleges for me to apply to. I only knew colleges based off their NCAA, basketball tournaments, because that's what my grandfather and I used to watch.
It's funny because I thought about that too. I was thinking, we're the program now with Hot 101 is literally a global program. We have hot101.net has listeners around the globe. But when you mention, but I happen to live, here in the Saucon Valley in Hellertown, Lower Saucon Township, part of the Lehigh Valley, and we predominantly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And of course, when you mention Georgetown, the Villanova folks around here, there's a little thing going. There's a little bit of that going on.
No,
I'm sure you hear that occasionally.
Villanova, Syracuse, we hear the rivalry sometimes, but it's okay. We're still doing pretty well in basketball. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
But yeah, I went to Georgetown University, really unexpectedly. Wasn't sure I was going to go to college. And like I said, my best friend's mother pretty much helped me put together a list. Got accepted my sophomore year there. I happened to meet Senator Casey. He came and gave a speech, and I walked up to the senator and I said, "Hi, sir. You don't know me, but I'm a first-generation college student from York, Pennsylvania, and I want to intern for you." Honestly, it worked. I spoke with his chief of staff and eventually the chief of staff's assistant and got an internship the next semester with the senator. And that was really, I guess, the pivot to figuring out that my love for people comes down to a title called public service. And after I graduated, I got a call from the senator's office, pretty much being offered a job, and then worked for them for a year. It was the senator's office that recommended me to the White House. So after working a year for Senator Casey, I transitioned to the Office of Management and Budget, where I served as the advisor and assistant to the Secretary of Management and Budget, Sean Donovan, for almost 2 years. After leaving that, I was actually doing my master's degree full-time while working at the White House full-time. And so I had a few months left of my master's degree. And while I was still in DC pursuing that, I worked with Ambassador Cynthia Schneider of Georgetown University. They were starting a new program, her and Derek Goodman, who does performance arts there. And it was great. I got a chance to meet a lot of ambassadors and really intersect my love for theater and also foreign affairs. Then I came back, ran for Congress. And like I said before, it's remembering that there's people out there who need help. And I grew up in that situation. I said, I've been privileged enough to get an education. I've been, privileged enough to see the rest of the world. But I know so many of my friends, my family members, my community members haven't had that opportunity. And so I wanted to use the insight, use the knowledge I've attained to help the people of my area. And so that's why I ran for Congress. And I, at that time, was representing York, Cumberland, and Dauphin counties.
This would have been the old PA-10, not the current.
No, the current PA-10.
It is the current PA-10.
Yeah, it was the old PA-4,
right,
which had Adams County in it, and then Adams County got taken out, and it became more all of Dauphin County, more of Cumberland County. So the lines changed a little, about 3/4 of the way through my race. The lines changed, so you had to come up with a whole new strategy, a whole new everything for the last 3 months. But I learned so much during that race. There's one thing that I always tell, it's a quote my grandma always told me growing up by Nelson Mandela. A lot of people say, "Oh, you lost a congressional race," but it was a really slim margin. And I honestly, in my mind, I don't think I lost. I live by this quote that Nelson Mandela said. He says, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." And the stuff that I learned from that race, has made me a better public servant, has made me a better community member, and hopefully down the line, it'll one day make me a great legislator.
Well, one of the things that regular attendees here to the program, because one of the fun things, I guess, about Facebook is that the program lives on, in perpetuity. It gets recorded, it gets to stay there. For the folks who are just joining us for the first time on Hot 101 listening live, we're so thrilled that you're here, and we hope that this new venture here on Hot 101 is something that you can learn and grow from, and having somebody like Shavonnia here is just an excellent example of what you can do sometimes just by asking. And that's the question that I want to lead into, because sometimes it isn't just policy and politics and black and white and mechanical and concrete. I think you know what I'm trying to get at. It's not just if you had not approached Senator Casey that day, how much of what you have gotten into since would actually be happening to you? I mean, I get into this a lot with with kids and even sometimes with candidates, is that you were not interning for Senator Casey before you asked that question. So if you had asked him that question and he said no, you would still not have been interning for Senator Casey. So what did you lose by asking that question? So sometimes, is it not just as simple as mustering up a little bit of courage and asking a question?
I mean, when I talk to youth groups all the time, and honestly, even adults, I always tell them, I'm like, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid, honestly, to embarrass yourself. And that's how I felt at that time. I was a sophomore, never met a U.S. senator in my life, come from a really, impoverished area of York, Pennsylvania. And this man who represents the entirety of my state is standing there in a really nice blue suit. Senator Casey has great blue suits. And, Jeff, honestly, I was sweating. I was sweating out of parts of my body I didn't even know I could sweat out. Like my fingertips were sweating, my hands, I don't know, like just every part of my body was sweating. And I was with my friends. I was with 4 or 5 friends who came to hear the senator speak with me. I was the only Pennsylvanian, and I wanted to go. I said, "Oh, he's my senator. Like, I want to hear what he has to say." And, I wasn't really too much into the political scene then, but I was definitely aware of it. And I looked at my friends and I said, "Hey friends, I want to go talk to my senator." And it was a typical reaction, "Whoa, are you crazy? Like, he's your senator, he's this, he's that." But there was just something innate in me that said, just go up there and just say hi to him. I had no idea what I was going to say. I had nothing. I'm pretty sure when I shook his hand, it was like Niagara Falls, like when our hands were like touching. I don't know, because I was sweating that much. And I literally just said, like, "Hi, Senator. My name is Shavonnia. I'm a first-generation college student from York. I want to intern for you." And that's all I could think of saying. And it just came out like that. And he was just so kind. And he said, "It was nice to meet you, Shavonnia." He said, "Well, there's my chief of staff right there. Go talk to him if you're really interested." And that was it. I didn't know what to do after that. I was like, what do I say the same thing to the chief of staff? Like, what do I have to live through this all again? I was just hoping it would be done after that 10 seconds, But
isn't honestly, that's a very human moment. And I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get to a little bit, is a combination of, yes, this is a largely the Kennedy Effect is largely a political program, and we do talk about issues in politics, and we talk about politics grounded in the history of our country and how politics, how the issues of our country, especially the current problems that we're facing, can be solved. And within just by looking back in our own history, it's generally speaking, the New Deal would solve most of what we face in our country, especially economic problems. But at that moment, when you're trying to get yourself together to do something like that, at that moment, you're not thinking about any of that. He's Bob Casey. His job is senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but he's the human being first.
Yeah.
And Shavonnia, the human being, is going to speak to Bob Casey, the human being who happens to be in this job. I guess my point is, and feel free to disagree with me, is that that's a very human moment.
Yeah.
It might be within the realm of politics, but it's a very human moment. It's one person who says, I need to make this opportunity happen for me. Yeah. And to this would be a great opportunity. I'm going to take charge of this little piece of my life, and I'm going to see what doors I can open for myself.
I think one thing that people forget about, public servants, politicians, whatever, category they want to put them in, is that everyone is human. You may not agree with the ideologies of a lot of people. Trust me, there's a lot of people I don't agree with ideologically. But you have to remember that everyone is still human. Everyone cries when they lose someone they love. Everyone, still wakes up and is sick, hopefully not from coronavirus. But, everyone still has a lot of the same emotions. And so, approaching my senator, of course, Senator Casey in general is a nice person in general. So approaching him, it was, like you said, it was a really human moment. And what I thought was like a small sophomore in Georgetown, approaching like this man who represents millions of people, I didn't, I guess it also kind of just shows like the disparity between what I would say, maybe education, maybe social class, maybe whatever it is. I didn't think, because I came from a poor area, I didn't think I was honestly worthy enough to talk to my senator. And that was something that I feared when I went to speak with him. Looking back at that time, I wasn't realizing, what I was feeling at that time, but now I can reflect on it. And I felt like, because I didn't come from maybe the same upbringing as him, or maybe have like a really strong last name that's known throughout the state, that I wasn't worthy enough to talk to this man. But the 10, 20 seconds that we did interact, it really proved to me that, he's a human, and he was willing to listen to me and willing to, tell me to go talk to his chief of staff. And I did. And it was from that 20 seconds, honestly, that changed, I will say, the trajectory of what I would then end up doing career-wise. And I didn't know, I didn't plan it. You always hear the things that say, be the change you want to be in the world. And everyone tries to think of like how they want to be that change. But sometimes it's that unplanned part that really propels the change that you want to see in the world. So
I want to run the risk a little bit of jumping around a bit too much, but something in your bio that I haven't really had too much of an opportunity to get into too much in the program in the first 2 months that we've been on the air is the foreign aspect, is foreign policy. It's something that I happen to enjoy personally. Hopefully everyone watching and listening will the same. And I think foreign policy is something that I don't think we focus enough on personally. I think economics takes that over. When you can't put food on the table, you're really not concerned what's happening outside your shores. I think that's rather natural. If you can't get the kids through college, if you can't afford to fix, if you can't afford car repairs and you can't get to work, you're not thinking about foreign affairs. And I think that's relatively natural. I don't think that's a hard thing to comprehend. But given the experience and the studies and the travel that you have in your background, is there a relatively not simple, but is there a relatively explicable way that you could put it into context for the folks that are watching and listening, perhaps in the 4 years or at least the years since you left the Obama administration, to kind of encapsulate what the rest of the world sees
Mm-hmm.
of the United States currently? I
That's a
know
good
the eye
question.
roll. That's a hard one. It's.
No, that's a good
I
question.
understand that that's a very, very broad question. Let me just say that I understand, and in no way am I trying to answer the question for you. I understand that that's a very broad, big question. We could probably do a 4-hour show just on that question. But is there a?
Let me know.
Yeah. Is there? Well, we'll schedule another. We can
All
schedule
right.
another show for that. But is there a not a simple answer, but is there a general sort of way to answer that people may not be considering, that they might think to themselves, well, why is that important? Or why is it, how is it that the rest of the world is looking at us now? And why is that important?
Yeah. So the tie with Obama, I can bring that up a little later. But actually, what I think is the best example is the coronavirus. And
I kind of figured that was an encapsulating.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
coronavirus is literally the best example right now. I know a lot of people don't discuss foreign policy. When I was running for the congressional seat, foreign policy wasn't a topic that a lot of people brought up. And I understand, like as you said, it's very like, how does this affect my wallet, my pocketbook? How can I feed my family? How can I pay my prescription? And that's how I try to tie all of the policies that I was advocating for, is that you need to realize how what is happening in Wuhan, China can affect what's happening in York, Pennsylvania, can affect what's happening in the Lehigh Valley, what's happening in Pittsburgh area. And I think the coronavirus is, that example. The fact that we have businesses going under, Pennsylvania's revenue has decreased by billions because of something that happened in Wuhan, China. Like, you can't prove the interconnectivity of the world any more than that. And that's why I think it's so important for people to understand what's happening in other parts of the world. When the New York Stock Exchange goes down, that's going to affect you. When there's an economic crisis in India, that's going to affect you. When there's a viral airborne disease coming out of a super small province in China, that's going to affect you. And people don't see it that way. People
if there is such a thing as a small city left in China, or a small province left, Wuhan is
small relative to the
relative to China. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Wuhan is what Wuhan is in the 1.8 million range in that city. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, roughly the size.
Other provinces in China.
Right. Yeah,
Comparison to some U.S. states, it's quite large.
Right, exactly. Right. Roughly the population of Philadelphia, I would think, isn't it? Roughly.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to give folks some context, as while I'm trying to color in the lines a little bit. I usually color outside the lines, but I'm
color all the lines.
Color all of them.
I'm all pro line coloring of any sort. But I think the coronavirus really kind of like a eye-opening to people, and it says, how can China really affect what's happening here? How can China affect me being able to get money to pay for my family? How can China affect me being able to afford my prescriptions? And it's just something I stress. It's like, we need to know what's happening with our neighbors, not only our northern and southern neighbor, but also our neighbors across the world. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in studying foreign policies. If you look at what I studied in my undergrad and my master's, it was US foreign politics, predominantly in India, Pakistan, and the Middle East. Those just happen to be my areas of particular interest. But it was, how do the politics of the US affect these issues? How do they respond to them? And then how in response does that then affect the US? And I feel like people always miss that part. If the US goes and attacks a country, that's somehow going to come back to the US in a different manner. But people always miss that there is a return factor to a lot of the tactics that the US uses overseas. And so, I guess learning to speak 5 languages, then, learning different types of, I'm not going to say everyone needs to learn different types of Arab and Indian dance. That's just something that I personally liked. But being able to speak with people, being more empathetic, being able to understand cultural differences, differences in intonation, differences in policies. It really it really was eye-opening. And I feel like it's something that everyone should be aware of. I'm not saying everyone needs to become a foreign affairs scholar, but everyone needs to know how interconnected this world is. Everyone needs to know that there are different religions, there's different cultures, there's different ways of thinking about things. I know here in the US, we're very strong-minded people. And we're saying, like, if it's not the American way, it's not the right way. But there's 250 6 other countries in this world, and you need to realize that every country, more or less sometimes thinks they're right. And so instead of fighting each other, instead of, I guess, tearing each other down, how are we going to be diplomatic, and how are we going to work together, not only for the benefit of each other, but also it's going to benefit our own country. The reasons why it's important for Trump to keep good alliances with Canada, with Mexico, with France, with Germany, is because we have strong ties with them. They're our partners, they're our allies. And by him demeaning Angela Merkel, talking bad about what's happening in France, blasting Mexico and Trudeau and Canada every 20 seconds, that's going to wear down on the relationships that have been built. And we need these relationships. And so that's why I think I personally got interested in foreign policies. That's why it's something that I also try to bring up to people, because it says that we're all interconnected. You don't have to be a scholar on it, you just have to be respectful of other people's ways of thought.
We are already at the bottom of the first hour of the program.
Oh my goodness!
Believe it or not, we're already at the
Wow.
bottom. I told you it was going to go fast. We're
Jack,
already at the bottom.
I'm ready for our 4-hour discussion on whatever you want.
I hope so. I hope you are. Believe me, I'll take it. I will take it. You do not have to convince me. We're already at the bottom of the first hour of the program. This is the Kennedy Effect for the 12th of July, 2020. A big shout out and welcome, and thank you for being here on the debut on hot101.net, the main website and the app. We thank you very much for being here. This could not happen without DJ Lexus, DJ Earl, and my friend, dear friend, partner, spirit guide, mentor, and all things positive in this world, April Riddick. For those of you watching on all the various platforms throughout Facebook, the pages, groups, and everything, we thank you for being here. You are welcome. You are honored. Any opinions, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, you are welcome and honored here. Your opinions are welcomed and respected. It is our home group page at That Other Side of Information where your questions and comments will be seen by me, that I can pass on to Shavonnia. We will take your questions and comments for discussion, and perhaps later on in the program, if we are able, because as you know, if you're a regular viewer, tuner in, listener of the tuner in, I just made a word for you, of the program, you will know that I tend to have a fight with the Google Voice program, which judging by my taskbar may have shut itself down, which is brilliant. Just to, hey, because we couldn't have a flawless go, could we? I will take your calls later in the program, but for right now, we're having a lovely and pleasant discussion with Shavonnia, and about all things. Well, about all things. How about that? About all things. When you are bouncing around, if that's not too much of an over exaggeration of your early childhood and your developmental years, your story is sadly an exception, probably not the rule. Mm-hmm. To go to university, to have this type of emphasis on the importance of education and self-improvement, and to have the internal fortitude, if that's the proper term for it, to walk up to Senator Casey and say, hey, this is who I am, and I'm going to grab this chance and take it. Where do you think, and I suppose we could have a larger organic discussion about nature versus nurture, but that's a very heady thing. But where do you think that comes from then? Does it come then from your grandparents, or did you have, if it's not overly personal of me to ask, I mean, did you have quality, good, decent foster parents along the way? Where does that come from?
Yeah, absolutely. My foster parents, they're deceased now. The actual parents that raised me, they she passed away maybe what 5 years ago, and he passed away maybe 10 or so years ago. But their family, like, their kids were always around, and so their kids actually they came to my high school graduation, they came to my Georgetown graduation, they came to my master's graduation at George Washington. They've always, even now, what, I'm 29 years old. Yeah, I just turned 29. They've always still been a part of my life, and I've been really blessed to have a great foster family. Of course, everyone prefers to be raised by their family, but if you're going to be raised by, at least people who love you, regardless of you share the same blood or not, honestly, that's literally all I can ask for. And so, even the other girls who I was, brought up with, I'm still in communication with them today. I think they're all three married. They all have kids. And it's great. Like, I know I've met many of their kids. And so I have absolutely no issues with my foster family. They've been really supportive. And like I said, them showing up to my graduations multiple times, you really couldn't ask for any more support, especially since it's not even like my actual parents that passed, because they passed away. It's their kids, because they were there. They were helping to raise us also. And they still show up and support. To go back to your question a little bit, I believe it's a little bit of nature and a little bit of nurture. You know, like I said, people can grow up in various different types of atmospheres within the family, various types of atmospheres within a city. Um, and I I think it's all about, one, how you look at these opportunities, and how you really personalize them. There were some points, I think, in my life that I'm not going to share out here, but there's some points in my life where I could have honestly, quote unquote, given up. But for some reason, I guess it's the same little voice that I had in me that told me to go talk to the senator. It was just like, this is not it, keep going. Or I remember certain days, like when I lived right in York City, like on Gas Avenue, York City. There was a park, Farquhar Park, we also always used to go to. There was always fights there. There was always shootings there. And honestly, it was like a sport to watch people fight each other and to watch people, be upset with each other about different things. And, I went with my other friends, maybe the first one or two times, but then after that, I was like, this is not something I'm interested in. Like, I was like, there's something, and what I thought when I saw that, I was like, there's something underlying here that needs to be addressed. And I don't know what it is. I'm like 11, 12 at that time. So I'm not, knowing that it's systemic poverty and that it's, a subpar education system. Like, I don't know what it is at that time, because honestly, I'm living the same thing. Like, I'm living the same thing. There was four of us sharing one bed in one room, me and the other sisters. So, I don't know what the difference is, because like I'm living the same life, but I was like, there's something that's happening that needs to be addressed. And that's that mentality I said that I always kept in mind, even when I got an education, even when I started working for people with titles and amazing titles at the front of their name. I always like, there's something that needs to be addressed in the rest of the community, and that's how I've always lived my life. And so like I said, like I feel like it's a little bit of nature, because there's a personal drive inside of everyone. And one thing I like to do is, like, I love to go talk to the kids in the inner city, areas where I grew up, even areas where I didn't grow up. And one thing I asked them was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one really talks to them about that. Everyone looks at, inner city youth, and they already have a predetermined deposition of like how these kids are going to act and how these kids are going to do this, X, Y, Z. And,
a lot of these kids, you still see it. A lot of these kids have given up on before they're even given a chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And like, I've just been, I will say, lucky enough that I was just given a chance. And the one chance I was given, in my youth, the one chance I was given during my college career, I took it and I ran with it. And so what I want to do is, like, I want to give these kids a chance. And whether it's me, whether it's my friends doing it, whether it's organizations that I help support and promote, it's like you said, like, people have given up on these youth before they're even, well developed, well born. And so like I said, I like to talk to them and like hear what they want to be. Many of them are like fashion designers, baseball players, XYZ. And then what I do a little further, I'm like, so what are you doing to achieve your dream? And that's that step that a lot of them haven't thought about, because honestly there's so many other factors that they have to be concerned about. A lot of them have to take care of their kid, not their kids, a lot of them have to take care of their siblings when they go back home, because their mom or their dad or their parents, if they're still together, are always working. A lot of them have to, some of them, especially the high schoolers, have a side gig to help pay for the bills. A lot of them have to go home and cook, so there's all these other factors that they are responsible for, that are put on their plates. And it definitely takes them away from, I will say, living their dream, unlike a lot of other kids who don't have to be put in those situations. And like I said, like there's something there that needs to be addressed, and that's what I want, not only community members to realize, but also like the legislators to realize. And that's what I've been fighting for. I'm not elected yet. Maybe one day I will be, but this is how I advocate for my community, is by being a part of them. So.
Well, I've already got multiple comments in on the Facebook feed about run again, Shavonnia. So just so you know. There's already been multiple comments here, Sarah Laird among them. If I scroll back, I'm sure I'll find more. Sarah, to run again. So there's multiple comments there already. Coming up on a quarter before the hour, just in case you're watching us on any of the various Facebook platforms and you have to go mobile, have to leave the house, have to leave the screen or something. Remember, you can always get us. You can now get us our debut Sunday on hot101.net on the main website, and the hot101.net app, which you can find on your Google Play or Apple App Store quite easily. Those are a little bit easier if you have to go mobile, and you can listen to the program that way. So you do speak in front of a lot of youth groups and try to convey that message to them as, let's just be blunt, a living example. You can do this. You're standing there in front of them. You did it. They can do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Youth groups. I go into schools. Talk to classrooms. Went to different summer camps, talk with them also. There's just the potential, honestly, in this whole Commonwealth is unbelievable. And that's, why I believe, having adequate funding for education is so important and so necessary. Like
there's a good question. There's a good place for me to. I know I'm jumping.
All right, go ahead.
I apologize. I'm jumping on you. I told you this is a conversation you and I are having. We could be having this conversation at the pub, or over dinner, or after a caucus meeting or something. There's just folks are just listening in. That's an interesting place to sit, because I did want to get to the policy and budget office, the management and budget office that you were working at, but. Mm-hmm. And I do want to get to that, so I'm kind of almost skipping ahead a tiny bit. We are jumping all over the place. I warned you that was going to happen.
As my grandmother says, the steering wheel goes both ways. So.
This tiny little thing under the hat here is jumping all over the place. But because I really did want to get to that, so I guess I'm jumping around a little bit. But if we are to take your experience at a place like the White House, the Center National Government Office of Management and Budget. If we take that experience and we move it to a place like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where we spend more money on prisons than education, we take that fact and that work and policy experience of yours, how do those two things come together to you? I mean, does that just mash up in your head and give you a headache? How do you not go out into public through the various methods or platforms that you have as a deeply accomplished human being, where people know you, they recognize your name, they recognize your face, where you have platforms to speak and make change? And not just explode. I mean, not just figuratively, everybody relax, sit down in your seats. Yeah. Figuratively, like wrap your hands around somebody and just shake them and go, what are you doing here? I mean, we do, because that's a fact, and you know that as well as everybody should anyway. That's a fact. I'm not just throwing something out there to inflame everybody. That's a fact. We spend more money in the Commonwealth on prisons than education. How do you speak to people about that? How do you speak to people in power about that? Not just folks on the street, because you speak to both. You speak to people on the street, you speak to people in power. How do you take that knowledge and experience, and how do you speak to people in both realms about such a twisted fact as that?
Yeah, I kind of like to think of myself as the liaison between the people on the street and the people in power. And I definitely could see that happening, especially now. I'm going to tie in a few different things, especially now, I will say, with the Black Lives Matters protests that have been happening.
Well, I was gonna get to that too eventually, but I
I
mean,
literally, I'm just going to tie it all in.
we're gonna get. Yep.
There.
It looks like spaghetti I'm throwing against the wall currently, but eventually, eventually it's all going to come together nicely. I promise.
Not a problem. Not a problem. No, we can bounce. We can bounce everywhere. If I'm answering something that you don't want me to yet, just stop me and I'll
You no, I told you, it's you and I are having a conversation. People are listening to it and they happen to be dropping in on it and watching it. It's all good. There's so much. Look, there's so much there's a page and a half on the bio. We're going to get to, there's so much to get to. I'm not going to cover all of it. I mean, there's so much experience and so many questions I could ask you. There's so many different ways to go. It's just that you say something, it's such an important thing to try to talk on and speak about. And since I moved back to the Commonwealth for a little over 4 years ago, to take care of my dad before he passed, it's one of the most shocking facts that has really always stuck with me. You hear some things that you hear, and you've been through this, I'm sure, especially in a life as full and as experienced as yours already as the old guy get off my lawn says, at such a young age. But that's one of the facts that I've learned that has really always stuck with me. It's one of the facts that's not just in the back processor, but it's always right at the front of my head. I think, the speaker of the House has said something that is really, really true. A budget really is a comment on your priorities. And when the Commonwealth,
a moral document, we call it.
Yeah, it is a moral document. And I am always very careful, and I'm very careful to advise the candidates that I work with in my off-air life that we are not a state. We are a Commonwealth. William Penn used the word on purpose. He picked that term purposefully. We are a commonwealth. We are all in this together. And when a place like the Commonwealth purposefully chooses to spend more money on incarceration, not rehabilitation, but incarceration, more than education, how do we first off, how do we sit back and take it? How do we fix it is, again, probably a whole program in and of itself. And perhaps perhaps I need to schedule a roundtable program about just that. But in your travels, again, because you speak to citizens, in various different capacities, but you also speak to people in power, and you've also worked in the most centralized budget place, perhaps other than the Appropriations Committee in the House. You've worked in the most centralized budget office in the nation. Taking all of that big experience, which is the longest worded question perhaps in history, how do you deal with that?
A little bit of what you said earlier, where you listen to what some people say, you just kind of want to shake them. That I will say that does happen a lot in my mind. Sometimes I'm shaking them because it's a lot to take in. And one thing that I notice that maybe some politicians here do, even some advocates who think of certain things, is that they really miss the intersectionality and the interconnectivity of different things. When people say the criminal justice system, it's not just the system. There's so many other factors feeding into the criminal justice system that also need to be addressed to then also address the criminal justice system. I feel like, kind of like I was saying before, being a liaison between the people in the suits and the people on the ground is, how I am seen, how I live my life, because this even affects me. Working in the White House, criminal justice reform was a big position for President Obama. It's something that he really took into consideration, and Governor Wolf has been doing his own in a certain regard, and it's moving along. Moving along now. There's a lot of pressure coming from Governor Wolf to really reform criminal justice, and I know that he's having conversations about that. It's honestly a personal issue for me. I have 4 siblings. They're all half siblings. We either share a same mom or same dad, but they're still my siblings regardless. And there's 3 boys and one other girl. And 2 of my brothers, the 2 that are from York, Pennsylvania, as myself, have both been in the system. One was in the system for a few months. He's out, and he was lucky enough to be on a work release. So, the transition wasn't too hard for him afterwards, but still, like, hearing his stories of what it was like in the system is heartbreaking. My other brother, on the other hand, was in the system for the first time he went in there. He was in there for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a crime he didn't commit. It was something he didn't do. He just happened to be in the place, and everyone who was there all got charged for that same crime. And then if you look at Pennsylvania, this is where they're spending all the money into criminal justice rather than education. If you look at Pennsylvania, there are so many stipulations for people who are released from prison. I believe one is they have 30, maybe 60 days to find a job afterwards. Otherwise, they're put back into the system. It's near impossible for them to get a credit card. They have to always check the box on applications saying that they have a criminal record. Finding housing, people who have criminal records and finding housing is near impossible. And so, all these stipulations are built up. And so what you have is an extremely high recidivism rate that could be addressed, like you said, with funding education more, or also creating more of a rehabilitation program in the prison systems than what we have now. We should look at places like Finland, and honestly, Finland and Norway.
I always point to Finland on the homeless, on the unsheltered, because they did a simple thing called math, mm-hmm. and realized that it was less expensive for them to literally take empty housing, mm-hmm. and hand it to the unsheltered. Yeah. And just give it to them. And they actually they've eliminated homelessness, like, properly. They didn't just reduce it, they've ended it.
We can look at them for a lot of things.
And spent less money. Yes. And it's the funny thing when you get into this, when you get into a policy debate with self-identified Republicans, and I use the word self-identified because when we talk about folks on the street who self-identify as Republicans, they have quite literally no economic justification whatsoever for being Republicans. They are essentially Republicans because an entire media machine has told them to do so. Mm-hmm. Or they consider themselves Republicans because of quote unquote social issues. They have no economic justification for it whatsoever. How did Europe become Europe? Mm-hmm. Or at least Europe as we know it today? Because we made it that way. Mm-hmm. We built it. Most of the economic systems that they have, some were left over from the late 1800s and a pre-World War I society, but most of the constitutions of Western Europe and the economic systems that they have in place are New Deal programs. Mm-hmm. They got them from us because there was literally nothing but devastation left after World War II. And now we're told by one party that we can't be like Europe. That's foreign. There's nothing foreign about it, folks. There's nothing foreign about it. Yeah. They got it from us. Yeah. When we look to the German, you mentioned Germany early on. There's mm-hmm. nothing, Germany in its own constitution, mm-hmm. has that any company, corporation, insert proper term here, with 500 employees or more must must have employee representation on its board of directors. Where would they have gotten such a crazy, wild idea? That's right. It was President Eisenhower.
Mm-hmm.
It was President Eisenhower, the Republican President Eisenhower. He got it from them. Or they got it from us. I just said that backward. They got it from us. There's nothing foreign about what's happening in Europe. They got most, if not all of it, depending on the country, from us. So when folks who are of a common policy persuasion, such as Shavonnia or myself, say that there is so much we could learn from Europe, I would make the subtle argument that it is not so much learning as relearning. It is revisiting our own political and policy history. Shavonnia, I'm not sure you mentioned this. I'm going down the rabbit hole a bit. We will get back. I promise we'll get back on track. I'm not sure if you noticed last week, I posted an article on the home group page, that other side of information, from, of all places, of all the sources, well, the source was The Guardian, but from all places, Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, who said in a public speech, I don't believe it was in Parliament, I think it was actually a public speech, that the economic rebound from the COVID guidelines, the shelter in place guidelines, I don't like to call it a lockdown or a shutdown. Those are prison-like, military-like terms. I think we've gotten too used to those terms. I don't like to use them. I think we've gotten all too used to that stuff.
Yeah.
But the safety guidelines that were put in place by COVID all around the planet, by the way, not just here, but everywhere. It was his assertion, or is his assertion, that it would take, quote unquote, Rooseveltian type programs, Rooseveltian style, Rooseveltian depth of programs, i.e. the New Deal, to dig the British economy out of virus safety guideline initiatives and restore the UK economy. As someone who worked deep in the Office of Management and Budget and knows where the money goes, and that's probably a 12-hour program. You've studied, you can't have the degrees that you have and not studied the political history of this country. What does that say to you? What does that say to you? Rooseveltian style, i.e., I'll not his words, but mine, New Deal style solutions.
Yeah. I mean, back when Roosevelt was releasing sort of, New Deal style solutions, they weren't liked. They were unpopular. People were bashing Roosevelt because it was something that was never tried before. And it was, honestly, it was innovative. It was a risk, but a calculated risk that I think Roosevelt was taking. I honestly, I'm going to have to agree on this front. I feel like to reboot the UK economy, UK is going to have to do something that the UK hasn't done before. And especially since now the UK...
Or at least hasn't done since the war.
Since the war, yeah. And now that the UK is, I guess, taking themselves away from the EU, hashtag Brexit, and they want to be their own, more or less independent, well, they are independent, but their own, independent entity within Europe, they're going to have to...
Once again, a completely singular entity, divorced from the EU.
Union, all of that. They're going to have to do some sort of innovative policies. And I feel like a really Roosevelt approach for this would work. I'll actually have to applaud Boris on this front, that he actually gave credit to Roosevelt for this. I feel like if this was Donald Trump who had these ideas, he would say something like, we got to do something that's never been done before. We've got to, it would list the Roosevelt plan, but then would give it the name of some sort of Trump administration thing and kind of have the guise of like, this has never been done before. So I actually have to give credit to Boris actually saying, hey, look, Roosevelt did this. It seemed to work. Let's see what we can take out of it and, reform to make work now for the UK. But the fact that he is looking, I know he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but the fact that he is looking on ways to revitalize the economy, now it's good. It's good. The UK needs to. I'm not going to get onto the medical side coronavirus cases because I have a whole speech on that.
Well, that would take us down the road of the NHS versus the industry that we have here.
I am just strictly looking at his economy, just point blank, not how it intersects with other things right now, because I will have a different conversation about that.
Exactly.
But there needs to be some sort of I guess more or less revolutionary plan that comes out to really help yes, the medical side and also the economies of these different countries. So the fact that he's giving credit to Roosevelt, I'll applaud him for that much. We'll see what Donald Trump has to say.
We have reached the top of the hour. We are actually a full hour into the program. It is the 12th of July, the Kennedy Effect for Sunday, 12 July 2020. My guest is Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson, because I finally got it right, an hour into only took me an hour into the program to get it correct. We are discussing a lot of different things. Shavonnia's early life, her growth into this, an incredibly full and esteemed career at the ripe young age of 29 compared to the ripe old age of 51. We're really thrilled to have everyone here, regardless of where you might be viewing or watching, listening in the background. And of course, this is our first debut weekend on the main home website at hot101.net or the hot101.net app. Please remember, if you can't watch or view on Facebook, you can join us on hot101.net, the website, or the hot101.net app. You can get the app on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Very, very easy to find. Just search hot101.net. You will find it there. If you think that you might be missing something by not watching on Facebook, this is a radio program that you get to view. You are not missing anything. Trust me, this is a face for radio, not Shavonnia's. That you would want to see. This is a face for radio. You're not missing anything. Trust me. It's an easy program to listen to, I promise. But we're discussing budget priorities, her growth as a human being, and how those educational and political opportunities have grown this extraordinary human being, and how she has taken those political and educational opportunities and, I guess you would say, paid it forward and pass them out into the community and use those experiences to try to make the world around her a better place. And after all, isn't that really kind of all what we're all about? To try to teach the community at large, teach youth, and at the same time continue her own growth, because after all, 29 isn't exactly the end of things. It is the beginning. We're far from over. There's a lot of years there left to go. And I have been asked very quietly by Sarah Laird to let you know that Maddie says hello.
Oh,
so there's a little quick. There's a quick shout out.
Hi, Maddie.
For you.
Oh, I love Maddie.
I would be. This one's a bit of a deep one, and I just want to hit this before I forget. Because I'm sure we'll come back to. I mean, the virus is just a dominating topic, and there's really nothing. There's no conversation in a format like this that you can do, or show like this, a format like this, that you can't talk virus. And then there's voting that we can talk about, voting suppression. There's all of the Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations, and the changes that we've already seen. In municipalities, large and small, all across the country, that we can talk about. there's a bit of a narrow topic that I wanted to ask you about, especially after reading your bio, that I just have to ask you about.
Yeah.
I'd be really stupid if I didn't ask. I've posted several articles about it on that other side of information. I hope folks have seen it and learned a bit about the situation, because it is not small. We're talking about two nuclear armed nations here. Have you followed, I think you're shaking your head, so I think you know where I'm going, but
Oh, yeah.
have you followed the border dispute between India and China?
Yeah. I mean, it's more or less
dead soldiers on both sides. So this is not a small thing. There have been armed exchanges and dead soldiers on both sides. Have you followed what's going on in the Himalayan border region between India and China?
Oh yeah, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a complete nerd, and foreign policy
Well, that's two
was.
of us, so thank you.
I'm a complete nerd. People are like, what? Really? I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, I'm a complete nerd. And especially if it has to do, one, of course, like domestic politics was happening here in our Commonwealth, but like I did my undergrad and my master's in India, Pakistan, and the Middle East. The Middle East predominantly like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, like the Gulf regions. Um, if there's anything happening over there, like I'm well aware of the world, but those areas, like I totally geek out in. This border dispute that's happening with India and China, it's honestly I don't know how to say it's not a new thing, because it's not new, but India and China have been having issues for forever. It has not hit the newspapers usually as much, but China and Pakistan have a much stronger relationship with each other than India does. So
if it's not an oversimplification,
Yeah.
and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to learn what I don't know, and if I get something wrong, I'm happy to be corrected about it. I obviously I have an ego. I'm sitting here behind a mic, and I won't generally.
I like that phrase.
And sometimes I don't, and sometimes I don't shut up. So, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm happy to be corrected. But if I'm not oversimplifying it, the Himalayan region that we're talking about is essentially disputed territory between India and China. India thinks it's theirs, China thinks it's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm correct, it is and has been traditionally considered Indian territory. China is sort of stretching a bit their territorial claims, not dissimilarly to what they are doing in the South Pacific, where they are literally just claiming islands that are either newly formed through volcanic activity or just literally islands that have traditionally been considered parts of other countries, but because literally no one lives there, they're just literally taking them. So these are Himalayan regions that have traditionally been considered part of India, where there might literally be one lone goat farmer living there who has always considered himself Indian, but because there have been no other Indian activity there, China has decided we'll have that, and are literally taking it. And as far as China's closer relationship with Pakistan, it's kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Would that be an oversimplification, or am I about right?
I mean, pretty much everything we're going to say today is oversimplification. I mean, any answer I can give to this dispute.
Would that be a gross oversimplification?
No, there you go. No. You've pretty much have gotten the basis of what's going on. I feel like when answering historical questions or relevant what's happening in the world, U.S. questions, there's always other underlying factors, and so I recognize that. Just pretty much like my answers now are just so they're easy for the audience to digest and not extremely nerdy and geeked out. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. But yeah, you pretty much hit it the nail on the head. Like you said, and like what I kind of mentioned a little earlier, Pakistan and China have always had a closer relationship. India and China have not had a close relationship, and the fact that Pakistan has a close relationship with China is pretty much the reason why India doesn't have that close relationship. India, of course, has a close relationship with the U.S. The U.S. has done many things in the past, to try to, I will say, what is it, seesaw, teeter-totter between the two countries. Hey, India, we'll give you this money. Then Pakistan gets upset. All right, Pakistan will give you this money. And then back to India, then back to Pakistan. So the U.S. has been going back and forth. Ultimately, I would say the U.S. if I had to choose, I would say the U.S. has a closer relationship with India, and thus then does not have that closer relationship with China. And so you pretty much have, two outside countries, the US and China, really playing a big part into what's happening in India and Pakistan. There's other parts of Southeast Asia that get influenced, but we're just going to look at these two nations right now. This dispute has been going on forever since the partition, and you've seen it, especially with the Kashmir region. There was a lot of news coming out with what
it was hot and heavy. There was like a week or two window where there were daily reports coming out of Kashmir, and now nothing, because we're such a closed nation. I mean, if it doesn't directly affect us, we pay no attention to it, and it's a shame. And the reason I bring it up is not just because you know about it, which you obviously do. We went through the bio at the beginning of the program, but again, these are three nuclear armed nations. Mm-hmm. Two of them have populations over 1 billion people, and could, at a moment's notice, well, not a moment, but a relatively short period of time, muster armies in the hundreds of millions if they conscripted or drafted in the short term, to use the easier language. If they instituted a draft, could muster armies in the hundreds of millions of people. So this is not this is not two nations fighting over one guy's goat farm in the Himalayas. This could be a bigger thing. This is not a small thing here that we're talking about. These are nuclear armed nations.
I think that's the most important point to point out, is that people forget that both India and Pakistan have nuclear arms. People think of Southeast Asia and they're like, oh, like fluff. I'm like, nah, you have two big countries over there with nuclear capability. Everyone needs to pay attention. And I think that's also why I chose to study India, Pakistan. I know when I was going to Georgetown, the Palestine-Israel conflict, still a super important conflict, but that was something that I know majority of Georgetown students were focusing on. I just got super interested in India, Pakistan. I said, no one's really looking at these two countries, also the greater South Asia. But I was like, no one's really looking at what's happening over here. And I was like, how does their, honestly, tension, how does their prisoners dilemma with them, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, which used to be West Pakistan, how is this playing out? And like you said, because they all have nuclear arms, they're in a prisoner's dilemma. If Pakistan knows they strike on India, India is going to strike back. But then China is going to strike Pakistan. But then the U.S. is going to get involved. But then you're going to have, and so it's honestly, I figure,
it's war games. It's the old.
If there's going to be a World War III, are we on 3 now? I don't even know. If there's going to be a World War III, I honestly feel like it could come from that region, and so that's why I was extremely interested in it and trying to see, what sort of diplomatic efforts could be done to resolve the tension in that area. I have studied that.
But you're also talking about roughly a third of the world's population just between those two countries. Mm-hmm. And the overwhelming economic power of those two nations. The United States has transferred, in the 40 years of Reaganism, we've transferred nearly our entire economic base to China, certainly our industrial base. Mm-hmm. We've transferred a great deal of our customer service base to India. Mm-hmm. So we're not just talking about large numbers of people and a nuclear arsenal. We've transferred our entire industrial base to China and our customer service base to India.
100%. And I think people need to definitely, realize that. There was something else I was going to say that I was really interested in saying. I haven't been to China yet, but I've been to Pakistan once, and I've been to India about 4 times. And you were talking about, 1/3 of the world's population there. Absolutely. Like I said, I haven't been to China, but India is dense. there is no road in India you can travel where you will not run into 20 other human beings. Like, I've been to Agra, where Taj Mahal is, Delhi, Goa, a few other places in between, but I spent most of my time in Mumbai, which is the biggest city of India. I think I only remember one street where I did not see a soul, and that was for a whole 5 seconds. It's really dense. It's really dense there, and that's also why they have the numbers, they have the people, they have the education. Bangalore right now is mirroring, if not surpassing, the Silicon Valley in California, and so there's such talent in that whole region. There's such economic stronghold in that region. There's such military and nuclear capability. I honestly don't understand why a lot of our federal legislators have overlooked that part of the world. And there's great food. So, so I'm just gonna put that out there. It's great food. I eat everything when I go there.
And an oddly populated country, because even though between the two countries, between China and India, you're talking roughly a third of the population of the planet, but India itself is oddly spread out, because within India itself, the population is highly concentrated on the coasts and in the cities, and then you have large swaths of the country where there's no one. In the mountainous regions, and you have desert regions where there are largely no one. But then Mumbai, like you mentioned, is so intensely crowded.
Yeah.
It also, by the way, is on a separate but similar topic, is one of the nations hardest hit by climate change. Because you have, here's a familiar face for you, by the way.
Oh, hi. How are you doing? Oh, it's nice to see you.
It's also one of the nations most hardly hit by climate change, because they're facing, in those large cities, Delhi and Mumbai are facing summertime daytime temperatures routinely now 120, 125 degrees. And large swaths of the population that are so poor they do not have climate control inside their homes and schools and whatnot. I mean, they're losing people. I mean, they can't take the temperatures. It's just,
I mean, like you said, the temperatures are there. The monsoons roll through South Asia, pretty calculated, but now they've become kind of irregular, weeks when they think they're going to come. And I would say the monsoons pretty much provide the water for the region for the rest of the year. And so when people think the monsoons are going to come, they've been a week late. Now they're 2 weeks late, and they're getting 3 weeks late, and they're getting stronger, and they're getting heavier. And it's kind of like the hurricanes that we've seen here in the U.S. Everyone, I guess, when Florida's used to maybe category 3, 4 hurricanes, these things are getting more powerful. They're getting more frequent. They're hitting larger areas of land, and that's exactly how the monsoons are. I remember being in India, for the monsoons right when it started. My first time going, the first time I went there, I was there for 2 months, and I remember right when the monsoons hit. My friends and I actually were at the movie theaters, and we left the movie theater, and my friend said, "Oh man, the monsoons came." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" The water was above my knee, and I'm 5'4", and the water was above my knee, and we are just trekking like this through the water. And you start, and after a while, more water comes, you start seeing things float down the street. Also there's what do you call it? Not irrigation, but I guess canals for the rain to drain off of. A lot of them were blocked by dirt or debris, and so there was just water just flooding all the streets of Mumbai, and it was really quite interesting to see. When I was there, it wasn't quote unquote that bad. I was not really used to having water up to my knees.
Definition of
all right, guys. Again, the definition is relative to other people. Not bad, exactly.
Right. It's your definition. It's what your definition of not bad is.
Exactly. To them, to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, and I'm like, oh, this is not bad. And I was like, all right, again, you have to realize, like I said earlier, everyone has a different perspective, and you have to realize what different people's perspectives are. So we ended up dancing in the monsoon rains, on the streets of Mumbai for the first night and stuff. But then it did quote unquote get bad. And I remember for almost 2.5, 3 weeks, we were stuck inside. We were stuck inside. I don't really watch a lot of TV. My friend who I was staying with, she's born and raised in Mumbai. We watched the whole series of Big Bang Theory. It's just there was literally nothing else to
all 10
do.
years.
Literally, I probably could have quoted the theme song after the first like 6 episodes, but yeah, so it was a really interesting experience. But yeah, environment plays into a lot of what's happening there in the region and stuff as well. So
How do you see, so that was how long ago that you were there?
well, the first time I went was 2014, and then the most recent time I have gone has been last year. I went to Pakistan, so I didn't go to India last year, but the year before that I went to India. So yeah, so about
You've
2 years for India, and Pakistan was last year.
So you've been to India under Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, I've been there under Modi.
So you've been there before Modi and after.
Yeah.
So you've seen
I
changes.
feel a question coming. I feel a question coming.
Yeah. So you've seen the changes in India, probably not dissimilar to the changes that you've seen here.
Yeah. Everyone has a different view of Modi. And like I said, like it depends on what your priority is and how you view Modi. For me, my priority is the people. I'm just gonna say it. Modi is very um, economic minded, and if that's your mo, then you're gonna like what he's doing. He's very economic minded. He's definitely driving Bangalore, like I said, which is a huge up and coming, honestly maybe already came a tech pub in southern India. He is putting giant signs in Mumbai to kind of like make it like New York City Times Square, with flashing lights, and really trying to drive the economy, the tourism, the that part of India. On the flip side, the side that I honestly focus on, that's great. Like, but the side I honestly focus on is the people side. There's still a huge amount of villages that do not have proper roads, that don't have irrigation, that don't have clean drinking water in India. There's increased poverty in a lot of places, especially in the cities like Delhi and like Mumbai. The first time I went there, there was a lot of poverty. The fourth time I went there, the last time, I feel like there was even more. Maybe, I was just, I don't know. Maybe I was comparing it to leaving the U.S. and what I saw there on the ground, but I feel like there was a lot more, and I feel like it's because of increased rent prices. Things have become a little more expensive in India. That being said, coming from American dollars, we're kings and queens there. I'm still going like this when I go to India. I can get a whole meal for $1.50. Have a great time, but I feel like you can see that there's an increase in prices, and it's definitely causing a, a big divide in India. There is not really a middle class of India. It's hard. Like, there's maybe some stragglers in there that would be considered middle class. I'm trying to put them, on the U.S. scale of like what middle class and stuff would be. Either in India, you're either wealthy or you're not. And then there's different degrees of like not wealthy, and then like different degrees of wealthy. But having an actual middle class, I feel like that's maybe something that's up and coming in India. But as of right now, the middle class wouldn't really be a term that a lot of Indians, even my friends who are Indian, would really use. Um, but that being said, it's a really interesting place to see. What I also really particularly like to see was, I loved going to Pakistan for the first time, and my favorite part about that is when I was in Pakistan, I went to Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, which is the capital. But Karachi and Lahore are the other big cities of Pakistan. Lahore is, I think, the biggest. Everyone was asking me, like, what's India like? Because to be Pakistani and to go to India, it's possible, but it's extremely difficult. Same if you're Indian and trying to go to Pakistan. It's possible, but it's just difficult. And so, a lot of my friends in India knew I was in Pakistan, and they would message me, be like, "Hey, you're so close, but we know we're still better." Like, yada yada. And it was joke. It was all in fun, and I knew that. And same with my Pakistani friends. You know, when I was there, they're like, yeah, like I'm glad you're probably glad you're not in India right now. Ha ha ha. And I'm like, yeah, okay, guys. But you know, it was you could just tell there was a genuine curiosity. Like, what's the food in India? Like, what's the culture in India like? And you know, it was just it's so it was funny to me because a lot of Americans are like, oh, Indians, Pakistanis, you know, Sri Lankans, Bengalis, whatever, all the same people, all the same thing. And if you ask Indians and Pakistanis, a lot of them will say, yeah, like, we overlap in some regards, but then there's still that question like, so what was the food in Pakistan like? What was this? And there are some differences. You know, there's actually a good amount of differences, and I really honestly enjoyed telling my friends who were Pakistani or my friends who were English, Indian, or even my American friends who were just generally curious, you know, about a culture that's so similar to theirs, but yet different. So
Because Modi is somewhat thrown into the same cadre as Trump, Netanyahu, Modi, Erdogan,
yeah,
the gentleman in Hungary whose name is escaping me at the moment. And although the Polish just had elections, having elections this weekend, you've seen Poland make a huge swing toward the right. You've had Italy make a move to the right. Spain did to an extent. Greece has to an extent. Is that how it is seen inside India?
I'm gonna just blatantly say yes. And here's the reason why. And this quote unquote swing to the right that we're seeing in a lot of places, I believe is all stemmed by nationalism. People are afraid, people are scared. And, you know, things like the coronavirus, things like the economy crashing, you know, there's so many uncertainties that are out there. And this is why I believe it's so important to have good relations with other countries, to know other people, to know other cultures, is because, you know, instead of being afraid and retreating, you know, I feel like this is a time that we should be collaborating, that we should be working together and say, you know, how does Poland affect the US? You know, what can we do with you, Poland? What do you need from us? What, like, you know, how can we help each other out? X, Y, Z. But what we see on the flip side is a lot of people retreating, and I feel like the retreat is under the name nationalism. And that's what we see with, you know, the election of Trump. You know, people are, you know, Donald Trump was smart. His his campaign strategy was impressive. A lot of people will disagree with me. The fact that this man went to a veterans event and didn't go to, you know, public debates, it was so smart. His political strategy was great. His rhetoric also was great. And he was saying the words that Americans wanted to hear. I will never vote for Donald Trump in my life. He can send me all the $1,200 stimulus checks that he wants to, and I would totally like a second one, sir. So please send it over this way. He can send me all the stimulus checks that he wants to. I don't believe in his ideology. I don't believe in his philosophy. But how he delivered it, I know is exactly what the people are looking for. You know, people are looking for someone who's on the ground, someone who's going to tell them exactly like it is and not use a bunch of superfluous words and words that go over his head. He would just go there and say, economy is bad. I will fix it. That's it. Everyone's like, all right, well, that sounds good to me, you know? And it was extremely relatable, and it was all under the guise of nationalism. And I feel like honestly that's a lot of like how Modi is in India. You know, for him it's not necessarily nationalism, it's more of a religious nationalism. So like the Hindu ideology. When the partition happened, you know, it was the partition, again, just super baseline, not giving all of the history, but the partition pretty much sent all of the Muslims to Pakistan, and all of the Hindus and non-Muslims pretty much stayed in India. That did not happen very well, not at all. Like India has, I think, the third largest Muslim population in the world, honestly. So you know, their plan did not really.
The former British colony and territory after World War II split, took the Muslims to Pakistan, took the Hindus or not only Hindus, but as Shavonnia said, anyone essentially non-Muslim moved to the Indian side of the border, and they split. It was all one territory, one British colony, but
it was all one territory.
as the British withdrew after World War II because they could no longer maintain the empire, which is what we're seeing actually happen to the United States at this point. We can no longer maintain the empire, and which is what we saw with Rome as well, by the way, when the rich people decided they didn't want to pay for the empire anymore and put that financial burden onto the 99%, and they didn't have the money to maintain the empire anymore. We saw the end of the Roman Empire. We're seeing it now at the end of the American Empire as well. That's essentially what we're talking about there from a historical standpoint. Is if
Thank you for breaking that down.
If you look at a world map, and you see India and Pakistan, that was all one British colony, one British territory, and it was part of the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, and well, they are actually still part of the British Commonwealth from an economic standpoint. But
I forget the guy's name who drew the lines, but my favorite part of that story is it was an Englishman who's never been to the region and literally was sitting in an office in the UK and was like, "We're just gonna draw
essentially
it like
where
this."
it's essentially how they drew most of the borders in the Middle East, which is what we're all still suffering from. Yes,
literally, still suffering from it.
Yeah.
But,
that's how they essentially drew most of the borders in the Middle East as well. It just sort of lines, arbitrary lines around, didn't take into account any of the tribal issues or anything of the such. We've actually reached the bottom of the second hour. My guest is Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson. We're discussing, just all sorts of fun stuff. I mean, I'd like to run through everything that we've discussed. We hit on so many different things, but we speak about the vast wealth differences in a nation as large and as important on the world stage as India. And we kind of skirted around, but mentioned a bit the vast wealth that has been transferred to a nation as vastly important and as now first world and a superpower in its own right as China.
Yeah.
Because even though you are 29 and have grown up in a nation that has only known Reaganomics, Reaganism, and the post-Reagan austerity era, you are, thank God, studied. And, I tell my self-identified Republican friends a lot, and I do have Republican friends, and even though we disagree, and it sounds like I'm kicking them in the teeth right now, I'm not. We just disagree on things. I think one of the great things about the Gregorian calendar is that it is sequential. It counts.
Yeah.
This is 2020, which presupposes that there was a 2019, which presupposes there was an 18 and a 17. We had a 1980, which presupposes there was a 79 and a 78. It also means that there was a 1932 and a 31 and a 30 and a 29. So we have had a nation that operated under a different set of rules. It has not always been a nation of a top marginal tax rate of 35%. When Mr. Reagan came to office, it was 74%. We have not always had a corporate tax rate of 25%. It was 35%. We've not always had a capital gains tax rate of what I believe is now 15%. It might be higher than that. I might be wrong. Someone will correct me. And that's fine if you do correct me. I'm happy to be correct. I'm happy if someone wants to correct me.
Nope.
If someone wants to correct me in the chat, please do. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. But I believe the top cap gains tax now is 15, but I could be wrong about that. It used to be higher. We used to not be able, CEOs used to not be able to be paid in stock. They had to be paid in regular cash income. And that's why they would max out. They used to only, the average CEO pay used to only be 20 times what the lowest paid worker was. Now it's above 400 times because they can now be paid in stock. As somebody who worked, again, in Office of Budget and Management, despite the fact that you've grown in a country that is only post-Reagan, I happen to remember a pre-Reagan era. What do you see as the solution? We kind of touched on it a little earlier with the UK and Prime Minister Johnson. do you see the New Deal as the solution to restoring the United States? Is that the avenue that we need to pursue to restore any sense of equality to the United States? When three people in the United States, this is a fact I'm sure that you're aware of, but for the benefit of those watching and those listening on Hot 101,
Mm-hmm.
when three people in the United States have as much wealth as the bottom 160 million, three,
Yeah.
fingers on one hand,
Jeez.
as much wealth as the bottom 160 million. In other words, roughly 60% of the nation. When 400 people on the entire globe have as much wealth as the bottom 60% of the planet, is it only New Deal Rooseveltian ideas that are going to restore this in any way, shape, or form? You've worked on, studied, and know the intricacies of a federal budget. Is this the only way?
I think
there's a nice big juicy question.
honestly, a majority of your questions have been nice big juicy questions. And
well, look, we could break. I could have you back. We could do shows every single night, 4 hours at a clip, and take some of these questions down to, extreme minutia. But let's, we're not, the majority of the audience aren't doctorate level folks on, budget and policy. But so for folks who are just going through their general day to day, trying to keep food on the table and trying to keep their jobs and, keep the car running and keep clothes on the kids, is this, is the new, but who might understand that we had a country before Reagan. Yeah. We had a different set of priorities. We had a complete tariff system. We had import taxes. We protected domestic industries. We had a private unionization percentage of nearly 37%. We had, instead of the less than 6% we have now, we had, the post office was not broke. We had, we invested a lot of money in public education. We invested a lot of money, nearly 5% of GDP, in infrastructure. We've done these things before, but there's a larger and larger and larger percentage of the population, to be perfectly blunt, as older folks pass on, that don't remember this stuff. Yeah. Because we're 40 years into this austerity, Reaganism, second Gilded Age type economy. We had one crash in 2007 that carried into 2008. It was an administration that you worked for that papered over the cracks, but didn't completely solve the problem, to be blunt, because we didn't reinstitute a New Deal. We simply injected a ton of money into the economy. This regime that we're in now has not solved anything. They've injected tons and tons and tons and tons of money into the economy, most of which, if not all, has gone to the top. All the new wealth created in the United States since 2000 has gone to the top 1%, all of it. All of it, 100%. You know that too. How do we restore a balance in this country? Is the New Deal or the Green New Deal or some type of New Deal, Rooseveltian style economy, Keynesian economics? Is this the only way that we restore? I got to smile when I say Keynesian economics. Is that the only way? Is that the only way that we restore any sort of balance back to this economy? Have we forgotten? Are there too many people on the front lines of this economy? When I mean, like me, just me, I'm part of the 99%. In fact, I'm no longer part of the middle class. I'm part of the working poor. Are there too many people in what's left of the middle class and the working poor that do not understand the fundamentals of an economy, that the economy works on the constant flow of money? I work, I get a paycheck, I take that paycheck, I go out, I buy groceries, I buy clothes, I buy car repairs, I might buy a new washer or dryer when mine quits. I I have a home, it needs painting, it needs repairs. And then that person who does the repairs goes and then they buy groceries and then they buy whatever they buy. And then the person they buy that from then goes on and buys. And then maybe once a month or so, we might go out to eat. And then the server there then goes out and buy. Have we forgotten all of that?
Honestly, for your New Deal question, and then I'll get into that. For your New Deal question, I think before we even launch a New Deal, what we need to do is actually respect and value the work that so many working class people do here in the US, and we need to pay them like we respect and like we value the work that they do. That's not happening. What's happening now is that you see there's an unfair tax rate that's going on. What you hear about is the government wants to do trickle down effects. Trickle down does not work, people. Trickle down does not work. Like you said, like you see the administration right now slapping bandages on what's happening with, like I said, stimulus checks. Donald Trump can send me all the stimulus checks he wants. I will happily take them, but I know it's not solving the long-term problem. Honestly, even a lot of the short-term problems that so many people are going through. What we need to do is, like I said, I like the Roosevelt approach that we were talking about earlier. But what I will say that there's so many more intricacies that are added on to now that Roosevelt didn't have to think about then as we do now. And so that's the only reason why I say, yeah, we shouldn't completely, mirror his program, parallel the program, but there are so many aspects of it that we can take that we can make sure are, good for us. For example, taxation. Taxation should be fair and it should be progressive. We should make sure that the taxation that's happening actually is sufficient enough for the revenues that we need taxation purposes for. Right now, a lot of the taxes that are happening come into the US government with one purpose, and they always get reallocated somewhere else. I'll give you all that little tidbit of what's happening in the budget office. We should need to make sure that the taxes that are being raised, the taxes that are being, received, they're actually being used for the purpose that they say they're going to be used for. We need to make sure that we have, I would say, equitable education. As you can see, there's certain pockets, I'm not even talking about the whole US in general. There's pockets in Pennsylvania where you can see the extreme difference in education levels throughout the state. I think I've traveled to maybe 37 out of these 67 counties, and just seeing the different level of education and how that is, plays into different taxes, how that plays into, as we said before, the moral code of a state, the moral code of the US, aka the budget. And it's just like, what areas are, I will say, quote unquote, valued are the areas that get the money. So we need to make sure that education is equitable. We need to make sure that the taxes that are being, received are actually fair and actually are going to do what they need to get done. We shouldn't keep raising taxes every year and not do anything with the money. That's exactly what people don't want to happen. What I've learned is people don't mind paying taxes as long as you actually do what you're supposed to do with the money. I know I don't. I know there's so many other people who don't mind, and that's the thing. If you do what you say you're going to do, that's all people can ask for. So yeah, like I said, the Roosevelt New Deal, I think we should definitely take that, but I think it comes down to actually respecting other people. We live in a capitalist society. Everyone wants to call, us democracy or whatever other words you want to do. Yes, we have democratic tendencies, but we are a capitalist society. And there's a certain portion that will just take,
Isn't that a mixing of terms between a governmental system and an economic system?
Oh, it is. And I'm getting there.
But you're getting there, okay.
Right.
But that's important. It's important. Because especially when we get these cannonballs lobbed at us from the party opposite, they like to mix terms like that too and scare the hell out of people for no good reason. We mix these governmental terms and these economic terms. Mm-hmm. So yes, capitalism is a system worked best when heavily regulated, as mm-hmm. it is in Europe. Europe is a capitalistic system as well. Yep. And governmentally, they are a democratic parliamentary system. Their economic system is at best, I shouldn't say at best, in all likely, I guess the best description of which you would probably call democratic socialism, where the parliamentary government heavily regulated, consumer protected, 99%, man on the street, quote unquote, man on the street, person on the street, protected capitalism.
Yeah.
There is no pure capitalistic society anywhere on earth.
Yeah.
Capitalism in its strictest form is making money from money.
Yeah.
No one in the society, very few people in the American society do that. Bankers do that. Wall Street people do that.
Wall Street does that. Yeah.
That is the strictest form of capitalism. When people throw at you, "I'm a capitalist," then ask them if they're a banker. Ask them if they're a Wall Street banker. Do you make money from money? No, I'm a carpenter. Then you're not a capitalist. You might believe in capitalism, but you are not a capitalist. The best way to take these arguments and throw them back at people who would put their weight on top of you figuratively or economically is to be educated. Be informed. And it is not hard to be informed. Folks may call themselves capitalists. They might believe in capitalism. Roosevelt believed in capitalism, but he believed in regulated capitalism.
It should be.
The New Deal and the banking regulations that came from it saved capitalism from itself.
Yep.
It saved capitalism from itself. And if those regulations had not been broken down, 2007, 2008 would not have happened. Not likely would not have happened, but would not have happened.
Yeah.
Let me turn the floor back to Shavonnia, since I've now been yelling at you for a couple minutes.
You're not yelling at me.
To let her finish her. Let me turn the floor back to her because I was screaming at you, the audience, there for a couple of seconds. But these are important terms, though, Shavonnia, because I think part of what we suffer from as an electorate and as a society as a whole, as a population as a whole, is that we get this soup of terms and we muddy up those terms as a, dare I say, deliberate method of keeping people ill-informed.
Yeah.
When you mention capitalism, hell, I think capitalism is perfectly fine as long as it is regulated properly.
Yep.
I often say to candidates, as part of their education, and the electorate and voters and friends and family as part of their education, regulations are protections. They're nothing other than protections.
Yeah.
Folks against regulations call them regulations because regulations have this connotation of regulations are weighing down upon you. They're keeping you from success. No, they're protecting you. There's a reason why it's called the Consumer Financial Protection Board.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So there's a reason why the richest, the top 1%, the top 0.1%, and the largest corporations are always talking about freeing, quote unquote, freeing you of these oppressive regulations. Why do they not want regulations? Because it makes more profit for them. They're the things in government that protect you, the 99%, from them. That's why they want to get rid of them.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress the importance enough of people being informed. And that was, and it's about doing your own education to see, what you actually believe, where you actually align. But as you kind of mentioned, and that started the one trajectory, is just that people hear certain terms and it becomes a trigger for them. And they think, if they hear the word capitalism, oh, it means one thing. If they hear socialism, oh, this is what it means. If they hear, everything.
We've linked capitalism with democracy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
We've linked capitalism with the West.
Yeah.
Instead of, during the Cold War, instead of communism with the East. Communism is a governmental form. It is not an economic system.
It's not, and
It
people here think it's an economic
right,
system.
Exactly. I think I drug us off on a tangent and I forgot where we were. But I think it's, and that's my own fault. That's my own fault, and I apologize. But I do. But I think because I wanted us to talk about Black Lives Matter, and I wanted us to talk about voting, and these are two subjects that are just rife with these triggers and these terms that have been so weighed down and so just mired in these terms that have been intentionally muddied and defined. And I will let you get back to capitalism, I promise, but it's just, we've twisted the term of capitalism, especially since Reagan, which is for me the seminal moment when, we have to remember that it was Reagan that came to office with the express intent. I believe he only said it once or twice in interviews, and because it worked and literally polled so badly, he stopped saying it in public. He came to office and was running for president with the intent to destroy the New Deal. That was his goal.
Yeah.
Why are you running for president, Mr. Reagan? My intention is to destroy and end anything that remains of the New Deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the top 1%, the top 1.1%, the largest corporations want to end regulations. Is why they hate government, because government is the one overarching power. It's the one overarching structure that societies create to prevent exactly those types of folks from controlling all the rest of us. If we don't have governments, it's what the revolution itself was fought for. We have to, for as flawed as the early parts of this nation were, we do have to remember that the founders were a group of rich guys who formed a government that was not meant to help them in many ways. The founding of this country was not perfect. It was not perfect. I'm talking to a woman of color if you're not watching on Facebook. The founding of this country was not perfect in a lot of ways. But you're also talking about a room full of white men who were wealthy, who built in a lot of different structures that were meant not to perpetuate their own wealth. It was Jefferson and Madison themselves that wanted an estate tax. They wanted a progressive tax system. They wanted an inheritance tax, specifically to not perpetuate a consistent and ongoing ruling class. It's what we fought a revolution for. Yeah. I got on quite a roll. I'm sweating.
Honestly, at this point, Jeff, like if people would take the time to educate themselves on a lot of these terms, what they actually mean, who they actually impact, what the actual end goal of these terms are, we would have a completely different society. And I will say that goes back to what I said about Donald Trump and his rhetoric being honestly amazing, is that he was able to take terms and messages and twist them in a way and still do it that, now every time people hear the word socialism, they shiver. They're like, oh, socialists are bad.
Well, they immediately think of the old Soviet Union,
exactly.
Don't they? Right.
And like the association with different triggers and different words, and people start to shudder. Whether you believe in socialism or not, understanding the actual fundamentals of socialism is one thing, but people don't take the time to do that. The president has given his own definition. The Republicans, honestly, even some of the Democrats have given their own definition of what socialism is, and it's become a completely negative thing. However, once everyone gets a $1,200 stimulus check, and the people who don't see socialism as negative are just like, this is socialism, everyone's like, no, this can't be.
I don't think a lot of people realize how much socialism is in the American society. The post office is socialism.
The post office,
There's no greater socialistic institution on the entire face of planet Earth than the United States military.
Yeah.
Anything that a large group of people contribute into, and then that money is spent on anything for the common good, is inherently socialistic. So government, by its mere definition, is socialistic. roads, water systems, sewage systems, airports, the military, the post office, public education. I could keep going ad infinitum, probably. All of these things are socialistic by their mere definition.
Mhm.
There has only been there's one nation on earth that is, even that is not 100% libertarian, but the closest thing to 100% libertarian right now, and that is Somalia. How's that working out? We had a libertarian experiment in Iraq. How did that work out? We tried another libertarian experiment in Afghanistan. They have moved away from that.
Yeah.
Even the Iraqis have moved away from that. I mean, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've stepped all over your answers.
I
trampled.
don't even know what my first answer was, but whatever you said,
It has something that we was something about information and explaining the.
Honestly,
No, I know what I was asking you. I was asking you whether the New Deal is the only thing that can drag us, is a return to the New Deal. And I don't even mean what was left of the New Deal by 1979, but is literally January. Well, no, he took over in March because it was the old takeover rules at that point. April of 1933. When Roosevelt took office, April 1933, when he was sworn in, are we talking that level of New Deal? Is that literally the only thing that is going to rebalance the scales in this country?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. And that's honestly, I think that's when I went down to first. We can put all the deals we want into place, but until we start actually respecting and valuing the work that people do in the society, I don't believe any deal is going to help us. Once we get to that point,
where does that start? The minimum wage? Is that what you mean by respecting the work, or just literally mentally respecting the work?
Mentally, and also paying people like we respect and like we value their work. The fact that teachers still have to supply their own office, their own classrooms, but yet you expect them to teach your kids all day long for a subpar salary, astronomical. The fact that Pennsylvania still has,
and then you see an Uber commercial where the gentleman is literally a teacher, and then he goes, and then I got my side hustle where I drive Uber on the weekends because I can't afford to be a teacher.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we treat it like it's normal.
Exactly. Everyone's like, oh, that's great. He's working 2 jobs. No, this man is working 2 extremely difficult jobs and still probably is swimming to pay his bills. You know, the fact that, sorry, I just dropped my headphones. The fact that we are, these things don't stay in my ear. I don't know why. They were a gift though.
Gotta get these big things.
I have those. These are a gift though, and I like them. You know, they can be discreet while I'm walking around, but they just never stay in my ear. So definitely lost one in the parking lot of Walmart once, but that's a different capitalistic thing. We'll talk about that later. But the fact that the fact that Pennsylvania still only pays people $7.25 to do amazing work, to do hard work, to do astronomical work it's degrading. Honestly, it's degrading and it's disrespectful. that's as best as I can describe it.
And then you want to force them to go back to work. And then you want to open up the economy and force them all to go back to work for $7.25. Even all the love in the world to anybody who might be listening in West Virginia. Even West Virginia is not paying $7.25 an hour.
Yeah.
On a minimum wage.
Working now in the legislature, I will say, I can't, of course, give exactly what a lot of these calls are that we get, but working now in the Senate, a lot of the calls we get from people are people who say that they're making more on unemployment, than they are for their employer. That is horrible. That is literally horrible. Employers need to pay their company, they need to pay them better. They need to pay their employees better. Every state around the U.S., every state around Pennsylvania has increased their minimum wage, and yet Pennsylvania still continues to sit on their hands. I know the governor has tried. I know right now he's pretty much at a standstill because he has a House and a Senate who do not, I guess, see eye to eye to him on this particular issue. So that's
or anything.
It's hard to do, especially if you have a House and a Senate who don't, I guess, align with what the executive branch wants. I mean, Obama saw that in 2008 when he tried to do the different stimulus packages, and Congress obviously was controlled by ours on both sides, and he couldn't. I think he got one out of the potential three packages he was supposed to get through.
And even that package, which is interesting, because somebody had mentioned that to me in the chat.
Really?
Somebody had asked me about that in the chat. Didn't he want to do multiple stimulus packages? He did. We have to remember, President Obama, although he served 2 terms, he only had 74 days, 74 legislative days of complete control of the House, Senate, and executive. 74 days. And he chose, for whatever reason, would not have been my legislative strategy, to be perfectly blunt, would not have been my legislative strategy. He chose to go after healthcare first. Even with that complete control, in his effort and desire to be bipartisan, that stimulus, that initial stimulus, which I believe his initial offer, I believe, was in the $1.2 trillion range, ended up being somewhere in the $846 billion range. Half of that was chopped down by the Republicans to be in the form of tax credits instead of direct financial spending on infrastructure, which is what President Obama had originally wanted. So it didn't have the impact that it should have had or would have had. Despite the impact that it did have, it would have had a much more deeper impact, a deeper effect, more, just a better impact. I can't think of better words. I don't know why I do that to myself. I keep thinking better ways to say things, but I've not said it right the first time. But just a better impact if it would have been actual spending rather than just tax credits, because then you're just kind of looking at numbers on a spreadsheet rather than actual cash in hand. But they chopped that from 1.3 trillion back to about 846 billion, I want to say. I'm working out of memory, so I could be wrong about that. And half of that ended up being credits instead of actual spending.
Yeah.
And he did want 2 more stimulus after that, but by that point, the Republicans had taken back Congress, and of course, everything ground to a halt after that, because we couldn't let him have any successes, could we?
Nope. Still even now. I mean, but that just goes to show that, I guess Pennsylvania we're at, honestly, I hate to say it, but we're at a standstill, and Pennsylvania needs to increase the minimum wage. It's long overdue. There are just so many people who have to choose between putting food on their table and being able to get their prescription at the end of the day. There's so many people who aren't able to feed themselves because they have to give that money to feed their children. There's so many people who are living below the poverty line. People in the system and different things like general assistance and stuff have been cut out by the House and by the Senate. And there's a lot of work we need to do in Pennsylvania, but definitely increasing the minimum wage. If everyone wants to reboost the economy, how can people go out and buy things to reboost their economy when they can't afford it? Did you ever think about that? Did business owners ever think about that? No. And so that's, it just comes down to that. As I said, this is simplistic, just really like bottom line stuff, but fighting for an equitable, livable wage is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I mean, I've not only seen how it affects people nowadays, but I grew up with that. Like I said, 4 girls sharing one bed, and just knowing that the money that whether my foster family was getting, was all being pretty much spent to us. And I remember eating chili sometimes for a whole entire week because we really couldn't afford, to buy that much food. And so, there's a living wage is hindering and shackling so much growth and so much potential, not only in the U.S., but especially here in our Commonwealth.
The minimum wage would, if the minimum wage from it's either 60 or 63.
Oh gosh, don't even talk about how much it would be if it was taxed on inflation.
I know
exactly where you were going. you're going.
You see that we're right on. Thank goodness we do have the Zoom on this part of it, because we're right in the same lane tonight. Wow, we are tied. Maybe this was serendipity tonight.
Yeah, see.
I hope you're jealous, Cole, because I'll tell you
That's
what,
right, Cole.
Shavonnia and I are right on top of things. The minimum wage from 1960, it's either 60 or 63. If it had been tied to worker productivity, would be over $22 an hour now.
Yep.
And if it had been, the worst stat, the one that burns me even more really, is if the minimum wage had been tied to CEO pay, would be over $33 an hour. So isn't that funny that what's good for the goose, in this case, the golden goose. We are actually past 7 p.m. Eastern on the 12th of July, 2020, on the Kennedy Effect. Our home Facebook page is That Other Side of Information. If you are watching there, we will take questions and comments there. Any of the other 30 plus Facebook pages and groups that you are watching, we're just happy to have you, but it is our home Facebook page, That Other Side of Information, where we will see your questions and comments. And thank you and welcome to all of our listeners at hot101.net and the hot101.net app. This is our first Sunday on hot101.net. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are thrilled to have you, and we are thrilled to be part of the hot101.net family. Our thanks to DJ Lexus, DJ Earl, and my partner, friend, spirit guide, at times psychiatrist when I'm nervous and freaking out, April Riddick, for being part of the hot101.net family. We'll be opening the phone line later in the show. My guest is Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson. We're talking economics. We did a little foreign policy earlier on in the program, and we'll be taking your phone calls later on in the program as well. If you are listening on hot101.net, you will be able to call in. If you are anywhere on Facebook, you will be able to call in when we put out the phone number. I do not want to skip these two very important topics before I possibly have to lose you to get on to the other work that I know you said you need to do tonight. So I want to get to two topics before you have to move on. You have been beyond gracious with the time you have given me thus far. So I want to get to Black Lives Matter protests and movements, and what has been accomplished so far, and where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. And I do want to get to voting. I will put those two on a platter, and you choose which one you want to get to first.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I do have to jump off soon. They've already started texting and everything. So I have to go relatively soon. But one first.
And actually, I'm going to add. I'm sorry. I'm going to add a third one to you. I will let you jump to whichever one you want to get to. The importance of the census, which I think is drastically under spoken about in our country.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna see how best I can tie all these in, and if you need more information, let me know.
You can jump straight. Just whatever. I would like to at least have a word, or a few about each three, but whatever one you think is most important to get to first, before you have to go. I know you said you had more work to do tonight, so you've been exceptionally gracious with your time. So whatever you want to get to first that you think is most important. Absolutely. But I'd like to get to those three if we could before you have to go.
Sure thing. So I'm going to start with Black Lives Matter. We've been seeing an uprise in protests happening not only around the U.S., but around the entire world. This has actually been, what I've heard they documented now, the largest civil rights movement that has happened worldwide. And it's amazing. It's sad that it took this point it took this long to get to this point, but, I'm really hoping that we can get some tangible change from the civil rights movement. One thing I really love doing is speaking with a lot of older African Americans, Black people, and just especially like my grandmother's age, and hearing about her civil rights movement and then like the civil rights movement now, like what was similar, what was different, and honestly, bottom line, it's unfortunately really still the same message. Still, talking about the criminal justice system, still talking about, the poverty and the racism that we see in society, still talking about wanting to have fair and equitable rights. As a full person in society. There's just so much to unpack there, and I've personally have not only enjoyed, but I've been depleted energy wise and also refilled energy wise going and being a part of these protests. I have spoken at a few protests so far throughout the Commonwealth. I've also marched in a protest with the governor. Some people have, my friends in California messaged me. They saw the governor, my picture on MSNBC, all around the country. So it was pretty great. But, having your governor come out and really I and march with you shows, that he values as a person. I'm not going to get into politics. Everyone, some people like Governor Wolf for this reason, not for this reason. There's a lot of things that can be changed, things he's working on and things, that still need to have a conversation. But the fact that he was willing to show up and be in a suit in 98-degree weather and stay with us for the full 3.5 hours, what other governors are going to do that? I haven't really heard, there's 49 other states. How many other governors have you heard doing that? And some people say, it's just a show, it's just a this. He stood there for 3.5 hours. He could have come, given his speech, been on his way, which is, a typical thing that a lot of public servants, politicians do. He marched for 3.5 hours. He held signs. He was a part of the movement. And it was whatever you want to call it. It was nice just to see him out there walking with you and him, without saying it, but with him saying, like, I value you as a person. And it's something, honestly, I haven't heard the president say about the Black community, about the Latino community, about the LGBTQIA plus community, about the Native American community, the Natives community, so many other communities, And so it was really, I would say, just symbolic to see him out there. But that being said, there's so much work that needs to be done. The protests are not the only thing that need to happen. But the protests is a part that cannot stop, because everything works together. I work inside the Capitol building. I work with the legislators, and I have been harking about how we need new legislation, how we need to look at, what's being allocated to the police, what's this, what's that. I can only go so far, but you need the protests, you need the uproar from the population so people can actually start listening. And then you need the people on the inside of the building, like myself. And honestly, I'm only one of 2 Black chiefs of staffs in that whole building. But you need the people on the inside, who are going to say, all right, now you hear the people are upset. What are we going to do about this? And you need those people who are going to be behind the scenes and help pushing legislation to actually make tangible change. There's a part for everyone in protest. There's a part for everyone in these Black Lives Matter protests, whether you're actually Black or whether you don't identify as Black or African American. And that's what we want people to really see. If you're not going to protest, if you're not going to march, if you can't, if you don't want to, then donate, then donate money. If you can't do that, then, use your artistic skills to really show the true message. And that's what I mean, the true message of what these protests are about. If you're not going to do that, then have, community groups get together, talk about what it means to you, talk about this, learn about that. There's so many other underlying parts that people can do. People say, oh, I'm not Black, I can't be a part of this. We need your voice. We need your support. I expect that from every single community. I show up to every protest. I don't identify as Latino, but Latinx, but I show up to anything that has to do with that community, because I know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King Jr. used to say. And what we need solidarity between many groups. And so, like I said, we need people out there protesting, fundraising, sharing the message online. We need people inside the building advocating for better legislation. We need nonprofits coming up with the research. We need, it's a whole community effect. It's a whole village. You need the village to make the change. And so that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm pushing for. And I won't stop protesting inside and outside of the building.
The Sunday after Mr. Floyd was murdered, Our Revolution Pennsylvania, in coordination with some other group, we held literally an 8-hour long vigil online here that I was privileged enough to host for about 6 hours of it. Had the privilege of interviewing several Congress people and Senator Durbin. And and some state legislators as well. And the folks of color that I was honored enough to interview, it was interesting to me. I asked them a very simple question. And again, we've discussed some pretty weighty things here this evening. And tell me if this is an oversimplification. You're a human being. I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want anything different from your life. If you get married, you have children, you don't want anything different from their lives than I would want. You want safety, enough money to take care of yourself. I'm assuming, you know, if you hit a mega lottery, I'm sure you'd be happy just as much as I would be. But you'd like to be happy, healthy, safe, well, decent education. You've had a good education. Should you have children, you'd like them to have a good education. There is nothing different between you and I, except you have a lot more melanin in your skin than I do. Then again, if you look at me, just about everyone on Earth has a lot more melanin in their skin than I do. I'm borderline translucent. I only have two colors, translucent and burnt, after about 2 to 3 minutes of sunshine. Have we really devolved? I know that this is a problem that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, but are we that fragile or shallow of a society that one group of folks with X amount of melanin in their skin would look differently at another group with this much melanin differently, simply for that one scientific fact? Because there is no actual different race of people. We are all scientifically the same race of people. The only difference is you have a different skin coloring. I mean, are we that shallow of a species?
I mean, yes. That's how nearly every country was formed. So yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, if you're gonna scientifically look at it, then yeah, scientifically, yeah, I agree. We have, what is it called? The out of Africa theory, where everyone originated from some part of Africa. The migrations happened. With that migration, then came the lessening of melanin. You know, scientifically, yeah. So honestly, yeah, everyone is interconnected in some sort of way in that regard. That I 100% agree. But unfortunately,
that's the differences that we've all. That is literally the only thing that we've boiled it down to.
Yeah, but it, you know, and like I said earlier, like that's pretty much it. Like for not every country, but for a lot of countries, that's how many countries were formed. Colonization, the UK, Portugal, then honestly the US in its own regard, you know, colonization is what happened, you know. And we were talking about India, Pakistan earlier. That's colonization. The UK went there. They took over India. They said they were going there for spices. Still don't even spice their food, so I'm not sure what type of spices they were looking for. That's a different story. But you know, and they were targeting people, and obviously, you know, not all Indians are dark skinned. There's a huge array of like skin tones in India, but you know, they weren't perceived as white as the Englishmen that were there. And you know, they easily could divide a country, not only one time, India, Pakistan, but then India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan. And they literally took a subcontinent that for more or less was peaceful, getting along with each other, divided it, put them against each other, and you know, they othered each other rather than saying, hey, you Englishmen came here and you did this. Now India and Pakistan are fighting. And I'm like, but the British did this to both of you. And, you know, and that's how, and you see that just everywhere. Different parts of Africa, the United States, you know, the British came here. Now they're Americans, because that's what they call themselves. So the British came here and they just completely decimated the native population. Christopher Columbus discovered this country, quote unquote, discovered for people who can't see me on the radio. He says he discovered this country, decimated the native population, And again, it was, you know, I hate to say it, but just that tint of melanin in your skin is what triggers people. And the darker, the more the melanin, the more triggered people become. And it unfortunately plays out today. Like what you said at the beginning, you said, you're a human being, I'm a human being. I agree. But for so long, this country did not see me as a human being. This country saw me, saw my grandmother, saw the kids I'll eventually have one day, you know, the ancestors I had before me. It saw everyone as saw Black people as 3/5 of a human being. So it doesn't matter how much of a human being I see myself, if my own country that I'm growing up in only sees me as 3/5 of the human, that's where the problem arises. You know, it says like we the people fighting for fair, equitable rights. Fair, equitable rights, what it means by that is for straight white men. That's what it was talking about for. There was so long that white women were left out, so long that Black men were left out, Native men and women, Latino men and women, and then like Black women, of course, like with the last ones, per usual, per everything. But unfortunately, like that's just how, like I said, that's how countries were created. And that's how different populations also keep dominance. It's because they have to other someone else. And that's what it is. You know, Donald Trump's rhetoric and his main tactic, one of his main first points was about immigration.
Yes.
He could have come out here, talked about an amazing immigration policy, yada, yada, yada. But instead of doing that, he's like, all right, I don't know anything about immigration. And instead of people saying that, I'm just going to other the Mexicans. And that's what it is. Boom. Then you would see a rise in, you know, fatality against, you know, crimes against the Mexican American population, the Latinx population in general. And it's like, instead of like wanting to learn about something, instead of wanting to make something better, people just other it to keep their power. Then he othered the LGBTQIA plus community, then the African American community, then the disabled community, then, you know, and it just keeps going on and on. And he has to do that. Now it's the whole country of China. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. And it's divide and conquer mentality. And unfortunately, a lot of the divide and conquer, nearly, I would say 90% of divide and conquer mentality tactics are based on race. And you don't only see that here in the US. I see that when I travel. I've been to 20 countries so far. And, you know, one thing that I have to do before I travel to countries is see how they perceived not necessarily Black Americans, because a lot of countries don't know about Black Americans. They don't know about slavery. They don't know about the civil rights movement. And you could be like, what? Really? People here don't know about slavery. Go to Alabama, go to a plantation down there. They'll say all these nice things about a plantation, but will not mention slavery once, you know, or people would think that slaves were paid and slaves were given nice accommodations. People here don't know about slavery. So why is some person over in Turkey going to know about slavery, you know? And so when I travel, I have to say, all right, how do they perceive? I go online, I look at vlogs, I look at blogs, I look at Instagram posts, you know, try to find darker skinned people who have traveled to certain countries, try to see how they perceive migrant Africans, because that's usually how I get perceived is if you're Black, you're from Africa. So you must be a migrant, you know, coming overseas. And I will say the experience I've had in some countries has been, uh, it's I can't really pinpoint, like I can't make a group. There's I've experienced, I would say, little to no racism in certain areas, and I can name those countries where I've experienced little to no racism, and that's because maybe the Africans who are there are really, you know, wealthy, and so everyone sees me and they're like, oh, you're a Black person. For example, Dubai, Qatar. Those are probably two places. Every time I've been to Qatar 3 times. I've been to Dubai 3 times. I've been to 20 unique countries. Some countries I've been to multiple times, but Qatar, Dubai, I've been there 3 times. I think I only had one issue once in Dubai with race. And the only issue that we had with race is because I was actually coming back from Pakistan. And a lot of the Black people that go to Pakistan apparently buy drugs and then bring them to the UAE and to the Pakistanis. And so they were like, oh, okay, we got to check your stuff. And I was like, all right, you know, I understand, I guess, because I know what the relationship is with Americans or Black people who go to Pakistan. They think they're drug dealing. I have no intentions of drug dealing anything. I was just stopping to see my friend because I had a nice layover. That was it. But you have to look at how you're going to be perceived in different parts of the area. That being said, when I go to India, Pakistan, there's Indians who are darker than I am, much darker than I am, and yet I still get stared at and followed down the street. And like I remember one time in India, there was about 30 people literally just following me down the street in India. And it's just, you have to figure out how you're going to be perceived. In Greece, I had a great time in Greece, but then there were certain stores I would go shop into. I would go into the shop, and I realized then that Greece was having an issue with the Black African migrants who were coming off the boat. And, I obviously, just being Black, they're just like, oh, obviously you're a migrant. And so they thought I was going to like steal stuff out of the store. So they would literally just walk directly behind me, not trying to be discreet or anything, would just blatantly follow me because that's how they saw me. On the flip side, France has tons of African migrants, and they, I guess, relatively don't have a problem. So in France, I was pretty much invisible. Everyone was just like, all right, cool. Like, you're there. So every country perceives things differently. But I will say, being of darker skin, there are still instances where you do get looked at. Sometimes you do get followed, or you get your picture taken unwillingly, not only overseas, but also here in the United States. And like, there's been many a times I've shared before in different stories that I've been followed. At Georgetown University, I've been asked by the cops to show my Georgetown ID to prove that I've been there. There's so many instances where like I was maybe in trouble and I didn't call the cops because I was like, the cops is going to see me as the perpetrator and not the victim. So, you know, um, but yeah, I would love to be viewed as a human being, a full human being. But for a country that built itself and nearly wrote in the Constitution that people who look like me are only 3/5 of one, it's hard to change such an entrenched mentality in over a million people. So well over.
How deep of a message, how ingrained in your message, how important in your message when you visit and take part in the protests and demonstrations is voting? Is it hard to try to convince folks that voting still matters? Is it hard to is it well, I guess that's probably the right question. I mean, is it hard to convince them that voting still matters? Is it hard to convince them that they still have a voice, or is that actually the message that no, don't the message is not to walk away from the process, but to put yourself in the process even deeper. This all the things that you are angry about, all the things that you are demonstrating for is exactly why you have to vote. It's exactly why you need to be in the process. That's exactly why you have to be informed, why you need to listen to the discussion that you and I are having, exactly why you have to get in even deeper. When you talk to kids in school, it's exactly why, look what I've done, not just because I did it, but because you can do it. Because what are you going to run for when you're my age? Is that the message that you take out?
Yeah, that is the message. But I think before we can even get to that point, people need to realize that there's emotion behind people being at protests. There's emotion behind what people post on Facebook. And the emotion is usually frustration and oftentimes anger. And what I hear from a lot of people, particularly Black people, who don't want to vote, is that they've tried it and it hasn't worked. Or, honestly, we had Obama and nothing got better for me. The Those are two big things that I hear. And it's so important for me to keep on, I hate to say it, but harking on how important voting is. And it's not only because like I personally have lost, family members and friends and stuff, like not but me, my grandmother has lost family members and friends, fighting for the right to vote. But it's because I know the power that voting can change and voting can bring. And I know, what lies ahead if we don't vote. And another issue I hear is that, people say, well, who do I vote for? They're like, I don't identify as Republican. And I feel like the Democratic Party is not listening to me. And it's frustrating, because honestly, it's not a unique feeling to feel that. I hear all the time, especially when
Not
I
always an
worked a
easy
little.
question to answer.
Yeah, I hear all the time, when I worked a little bit for the state party and I was like doing a minority outreach, and they would say, we only hear from the Democratic Party when it's time for minorities to come out and vote. What are you all going to do about that? And so it's a question I brought back to them, and it's a question I'm still waiting for them to answer. And so it's something, if we really want to, if the Democratic Party really wants to be the party of the people, they need to listen to the people, all year long. And that's something that I've spoken with my friends who work in the party, and it's something that I would like to change, honestly, if given the opportunity. And I try to do it in my own right, but sometimes you do need a machine, like I will say, a machine behind you to really make the full change that you would like to. That being said, I've spent a lot of my time focusing on minority communities, predominantly Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, Native, Asian, Asian meaning Southeast, South, and Central Asia.
South Pacific, Polynesian.
South, yeah, literally. There's a
Right,
whole
yeah.
clan of people over there in that whole area over there. I was trying to get everyone in there.
Right,
Josh was like, hey,
right.
communities. And it's sometimes it comes down to the lesser of two evils, and that's honestly a situation where you don't want to be in, but sometimes that's what it comes down to.
Well, is
And
it attacking it from the other side? Is it a glass half full, glass half empty argument that you may not, Mr. and Mrs. person that you're in front of, is it coming at it from the other angle that you may not have always gotten or seen the results from your vote that you wanted, but I can guarantee you that not voting is certainly not going to get you what you want to see.
I mean, what I do is like I make it tangible. I try to, like I said, I like to be the liaison between the suits and the people on the ground. And I really try to make politics tangible. And that came down to, like you said earlier, how does what's happening in China affect my pocket? Now we see it does because of coronavirus. Yep. And the same thing, how does not voting affect my pocket? And that's what I try to do. For example, in the Black community, the disproportionate incarceration of Black men and Black women is astronomical. And for a lot of people who are suffering from that in the community, I say, this is how voting for a judge is important. This one judge is the last deciding factor between your son or daughter going to prison. Yep. Are you going to vote for a judge now? And people are like, I didn't think of it that way. And the amount of times that people come to me and say, wow, I did not perceive it as that. I'm not gonna lie, the judge is not a quote unquote sexy race that people want to, run for or vote for. But when you figure out that if your son committed a crime, if it happens again and they have to go back to the court, you could either have this type of judge or you could have this type of judge. Like what type of judge? A judge that's full incarceration or a judge that believes in rehabilitation. And it's your choice. It's your vote that can decide that. So.
I got a question through Facebook. I know you probably need to move on, but I want to get the question to you because it's from Cheryl Baker. She was kind enough to type it in, so I want to get it to you before you have to leave us. Question for Shavonnia. I see this with my, oh crap, Siri, that was a really unfortunate time for you to open up. I see this, she always does that. I see this with my 18-year-old daughter. Kids today are so much further along than we middle-aged folks are, even ones like us who were through the civil rights movement. They are not as patient and want faster change than we are able to make. Incremental gains are possible. How do you keep them engaged when they are feeling like we, I guess my generation, her generation, are not doing enough?
That's a great question. I think it's also a good question because I'm a millennial. So I'm in between the Xers, the boomers, and the
There's
Gen
so many
Zers.
generations.
There's so many generations and everyone hates us and I just love it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, Cheryl, I hope you're still there. So I got your question to Shavonnia. So here comes the expert answer.
Hopefully so. Thanks for the question, Cheryl. what I would say is it's something that I've seen from like I said, I'm a millennial, but I have a lot of Gen Zer friends and also even like a lot of younger millennials. I'm still in the young spectrum of millennials.
Mhm.
We go from what, 26 years old to 38. So we're a big gamut of people. And I'm 29, so I'm still in the younger end of millennials. One thing that I will say is I know she says, how do we keep them engaged like when they're feeling like we're not doing enough? I don't think it's not that I don't think it's not about keeping them engaged. It's about valuing their perspective. And that's one thing that I see that happens a lot with the older generation. And I'm not only talking about, the civil rights movement, I'm talking about everything. You know, the older generation, I will say they have the wisdom, they have the knowledge, but they don't want to share it. They don't want to pass it down. They don't want to, for example, John Lewis has been in Congress for a multitude of years.
Yeah.
I feel like he should be mentoring people, teaching people, how to work, yada, yada, yada. I have tons of friends who live in this district who are extremely involved in politics, and they've never really had the opportunity to talk to John Lewis like that. And I feel like, what the young people want is they want to be valued. They actually want to speak with people who've lived through this before, and they want to hear from what they have to say. But when they ask you a question, when they come up with a different suggestion, what they don't want is for it to be tossed aside. And like I've heard that happening a lot, not only with the Gen Zers, but myself as a millennial. There's been many a times where I know people were putting on youth events and youth conferences, and I was the only youth there. And I'm just like, if we want to do a youth event, let's actually, get input from the youth. And it's not like the youth are going to take it over. It's not like the youth XYZ. It's just like, how can we start to make a bridge between all the different generations? And that's what needs to happen. This is my personal feel. I often feel like, sometimes like the older generations think the young people are going to come in and just completely, destroy everything, just kind of like wipe it all down. What we actually want to do is we actually want to work with the older generations. But I'll say sometimes if we don't, if we're not invited to the table, if we're not, if people aren't willing to have a conversation with us, that's when the young generation does their own thing. And if you look at the protests now, a lot of it is driven by the youth. And it's just because I personally know that I've had conversations with people who are older, who've been part of the civil rights movement, and they've been upset that the youth are leading these protests. And I'm just like, why are you upset with this? They've actually reached that. We've actually, not, I haven't played any, but I have friends who have. And they've reached out to older people and they're like, hey, come and join us. Come do this. Like, let's talk about this. Let's have a discussion group. Let's do something. And been met time and time again with a no. And so I don't think it's about keeping them engaged. You'd actually be surprised, even though I call them Generation TikTok and they're only like 5 years younger than I am. They're actually engaged and they actually want to be engaged. They have a different way of planning things, a different mechanism. And instead of being afraid by that, tap into that. The fact that all these Gen Zers, could save tickets for a Donald Trump rally and, make it seem like it was going to be a huge showing, but no one showed up. Imagine what we could do if, the older generation with the wisdom and the younger generation who's tech savvy, who's really innovative, like risk takers would get together and come up with a whole plan. Like, we would literally be an unstoppable progressive force. But what we need is for the younger generations to be willing to listen. What we need for the older generations to be willing to teach. And so once we have that willingness,
because sometimes it is that simple. Sometimes it is simple, though, isn't it? When we talk about the global climate crisis, or inside the Commonwealth, when we talk about moving away from the fossil fuel industry, and a young person will say, well, so put a solar panel on your roof.
Yeah.
And then an older person will say, well, it's not that simple. Well, you know what? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is that simple.
Yeah. Sometimes it really is. But, I think that was a great question.
Sometimes it is that simple. Put a solar panel on your roof.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is that easy sometimes, because there was a solar program in Germany, which you might be familiar with. The German government, it was the Merkel government, actually, incentivized all new homes had to be built with solar panels. And then they did a tax incentive program for existing homes, and all new business building construction had to have solar.
Yeah.
And they generated, and it worked so well. They did low interest loan programs for business. All brand new homes had to have solar, and they did even lower interest to refurbish older homes. They began to generate so much solar energy, they didn't know what to do with all of it. Now, Germany still, my friends on the right like to tell me that Germany still imports fossil fuels from Ukraine and from Russia. Yes, correct. They do. For trucks and for industry. Yes, I get it. They do. So stop throwing that at me. I get it.
Yeah.
But they began to generate so much solar energy, so much electricity from solar, they didn't know what to do with all of it. They actually started to sell some of it off to the Scandinavian countries because they literally couldn't store all of it.
Yeah.
And they decided they actually were faced with a problem. What are we going to do with all this energy? They had to then create a second incentive program to get folks to buy electric cars.
Yeah.
And they used the cars as a secondary storage method. Well, we can't store it all in the homes. There's literally too much of it. Where do we store the rest of this energy? Cars. We'll get everybody to buy a car.
100%.
You store the energy in the cars. People use the cars. They get where they're going. They charge them again. And they started to bleed off some of this extra electric energy. And all at the same time, they're greening the economy because they're working out these petrol cars. Petrol for you Americans is gas, by the way. They're working off the fossil fuel cars and transitioning over into electric and into plug-in hybrids. And I mean, sometimes the answer is that simple.
Yeah, sometimes it really is.
We
And
just
like,
need
honestly, Cheryl, I would just say, just sit them down. And honestly, the first question should be, what do you all want to see in this movement? Ask them. And then in return, they'll ask you. You don't have to go out and say it. They'll ask you because they actually care and they actually value your opinion and what you have to say. It's just that I know a lot of them feel overlooked. And a lot of them feel like they're not being heard. And that goes for Gen Zers and millennials, honestly. Like, you know, having the experience and the background and the knowledge that I do, I get overlooked a lot in so many discussions because people say, oh, well, you're too young to understand this. And I'm like, but how many of you in this room have controlled a $4.1 trillion budget? Exactly. You know, it's not necessarily about the age, it's about the experience, and it's about the willingness to work together. I'm willing to collaborate, but a lot of people don't want to collaborate with me because of a number associated with my name, my age.
How is it that you put that in the bio? I was curious about that. This is going to sound like an odd question for a lot of them.
You're fine. I just have to go really soon because my phone has been literally blowing up. I'm sorry.
How is it that you only had 4.1 trillion? Federal budget is 16 ish trillion.
Oh yeah.
Total federal budget is 16, or is that GDP? Do I have the GDP number?
Yeah, that's what that is. So
the GDP number is 16 trillion. The federal budget number is 6.
And I'm talking about from
or the part that you oversaw was 4 trillion.
The part that we oversaw mostly was 4 trillion. Well, we controlled.
I was curious about that.
We controlled pretty much.
There's a very geeky question, by the way.
Oh, no.
Most people are going, what? That's not enough money to overlook? What the heck?
Yeah, it's just a little bit, a little sprinkle of money.
Yeah,
right
a little
there.
sprinkle. That's a geeky question.
It's, as the budget increased, as we said, like the budget is the moral document. You only really get the funds for a budget that is allocated from Congress.
Okay.
That's what we
so that's the part that you were able to write.
Yeah.
Okay. That's that short answer. I should let you go. You've given me probably way more time than you ever wanted. This is probably turned in from a dream to a nightmare at some point. You're gonna wake up in the middle and they have visions about this.
The only nightmare is the phone calls I have to return after this.
I'm gonna keep you up late.
I actually had a great time. We should do a part 2 or something where we.
I would be thrilled to do a part 2. I would be thrilled. I would be absolutely thrilled to do a part 2. You know how to get you now know how to get a hold of me, you poor thing. I now have your number. You
oh no.
You poor girl. I now have your phone number. But listen, I know that you jumped in super, super late. We were working out details for this like late last night and early this morning. I just don't have enough thanks for you, especially for the amount of time that you gave me. I mean, over 3 hours. As most of you know who are regular watchers and for the first time listeners on hot101.net, my guest joins me early before we actually take the air, just in case there are any technical issues. We discussed a little bit of, how the show's going to go down and things like that. And so Shavonnia's been with me for over 3 hours now. And I don't have enough words to say thank you. I look forward to whenever it is that we are able to speak again. I look forward to the time that we hopefully have the opportunity to work together. To actually be in a place where we can be physically in the same space together, perhaps maybe even speaking at an event together, because I miss speaking at events greatly. I'm one of those rare birds. I love public speaking. I really, really enjoy it. The more people, the better. I don't get nervous. I love it. Whether it's state committee or whatever. Maybe we'll bump into each other this week on the Zoom, the state committee Zooms. There's only 1,000 of those, right? Yeah. Also, I'll send you the info. Our Revolution's having a Zoom hospitality after the end of all the state committee evenings, just a wind down, super relaxed, chat session after that. But listen, I don't have one of the rare times I'm a little bit of a loss for words. I'm just thrilled, and I'm just extremely, extremely grateful for all the time that you've given me, the expertise, the knowledge, and just the kindness that you've showed me, and for you being here and everything that you've shared with me and all the listeners and all the folks at Hot 101. And I don't have enough words, and I don't have enough thanks. I'm just very, very grateful. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again, Jeff, for having me. Thanks, April, also. When you see her again, tell her I said thank you as well. And for everyone who is viewing, if people have any questions for me directly.
Yeah, what is the best way? What are the ways to get a hold of you? What are
the best ways are probably my Facebook and my Twitter accounts. They both have the same handle. So if you go to Facebook or Twitter, it's SCJ, the number 4 PA. So my initials SCJ, Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson. So SCJ, the number 4, and then PA. That's my Facebook, and that's also my Twitter handle. So you all are more than welcome to reach out there, ask me questions directly if you would like, and just drop any other comments you want. So
I haven't even found you on Facebook yet. I need to. That was what I need to do. Well, it just happened. I mean, this all just happened last night. I have to find you on Facebook, but yeah. So and come find the page. There's good stuff there. There's foreign affairs there. How often do you find foreign affairs?
I am
like one of the only places that's foreign affairs.
No one else talks foreign affairs.
I know, right?
I really enjoyed that.
I know. Nobody says foreign affairs. It's all, especially in a virus thing. Everybody's so focused on a virus, as they should be. It's a serious thing. But I mean, anyway, thank you. I mean, just
thank you again, Jeff. And let's do a part 2 sometime. Or
we should do a part 2.
I really enjoyed myself.
There's so much stuff we didn't get to. I mean, there's always a lot going on in a country like the United States. It's a complicated, big country, but I mean, to 20 minutes on something like Black Lives Matter when you could do days and days and days and days on it is just.
I could do days on almost every topic we talk about.
I know.
Trust. So
yeah.
But thank you again. I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Bye.
Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson on the Kennedy Effect, July 12th. Still the 12th, right? He said he's still talking. On July 12th, 2020. Really, really honored to have somebody who is so genuinely accomplished and so just a super, super kind human being to be with me on the program, especially on my first show on hot101.net and on the hot101.net app. And if you don't have hot101.net, you can go to the main website at hot101.net or find the app on the Google Play or Apple App Store. Very easy to find. Just search hot101.net and you will find it. It is super easy. And again, I want to make sure that I thank the folks at hot101.net, DJ Lexus, DJ Earl for helping me get the software set up. And of course, my friend, my partner, my political consulting partner, my mentor, and someone whom I would not be here bringing you this show on Hot 101 or Facebook or anywhere really for that matter, April Riddick, who's just been, God sends you gifts every now and then, and he certainly has sent her to me and made all this possible. So we are 10 minutes before the third hour. 10 minutes left in the, no, am I already in the third hour? How's that work? Yeah, 10 minutes left in the third hour of the Kennedy Effect for 12 July 2020. Our home page is that other side of information on Facebook. If you are watching with us anywhere that you are watching, we are grateful and thankful. What I'm going to do now is explain to you a little bit of the behind the scenes. I will put on the Facebook and I will put on the Zoom so you can see it on the screen. The phone number for the show, and I will give you the phone number if you're listening on Hot 101, and I will take your calls. If we do not have any calls after a bit of time, we'll say goodnight for the night, but I will put the phone number on our homepage. Wherever you are watching on Facebook, we are thrilled that you are here. I would normally take phone calls with the guest, but we kept Shavonnia for a really long time, a lot longer than she was planning to give us. She was hoping she could give us about an hour. She stayed for 3. She is going to be working with the crafting legislation with Senate Democrats, PA Senate Democrats, for the rest of the night. So we really kept her a long time. So she couldn't stick around for phone calls, but she was beyond gracious with her time tonight. So I will be here to take your questions, calls on anything that we may have discussed with Shavonnia, or anything that might just be on your mind, especially the good folks at Hot 101 who want to know who this crazy guy is talking to you in your ears all night. I will put the phone number on the Facebook. That other side of information is the home group page for the Kennedy Effect. Our phone number is 267-227-9189. Let me explain to you a little bit of how this works for the good folks at Hot 101 who may have not heard the program before. We've constantly put the program since its inception on the Hot 101 Facebook page, and I have explained previously how this works. We use a little software program called Google Voice. And what it allows you to do is call me and have your voice heard over the various Facebook platforms and on Hot 101, where we can have a conversation. You can talk to me. This is a family show. You cannot use any of those forbidden words on the air. We have to keep it clean. But I have one phone line, so you can call me and we can speak there. I do not know where you are calling from. All I see is a phone number. I don't get a name. I don't get a town. I don't get any of that. So if you call and I answer, you can give me your first name and where you are calling from, like April from Allentown, Jeff from Hellertown, George from Stroudsburg, Matt from Easton, or anything like that, or Lex from Miami, or Earl from Jersey City, or anything like that. And then you can ask a question, we can have a conversation, and that's how it goes from there. So very simple. Phone number is area code 267-227-9189. 267-227-9189 is the phone number for the program. And we will take your calls on anything that you might want to discuss, anything that we were able to discuss with Shavonnia, or anything that might be on your mind. And she was an absolute rock star of a guest. That I've been so fortunate in this program that we have just had rock star guest after rock star guest after rock star guest. There has not been a rotten apple in a bunch. I got to be honest. We've just been so blessed with really good folks who really know what they're talking about, and just important topics. I mean, all the way back to the very first week with Chuck Panaccio and healthcare, all the way through to tonight. And it's just been such a pleasure to do all this and bring this to you. This is a dream of mine. This is what I've wanted to do since I was in high school. And I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to have my first week on hot101.net and the Hot 101 app. I hope you're enjoying the program. If you want to call, the phone line is open, and it's literally the phone line. I only have one, is open, and you're welcome to call in. It has been a long week, folks. We have seen a spike, a dramatic spike in coronavirus cases, especially in southern and western red states. It must be raining like crazy right here in the Saucon Valley, because I am hearing, and you might be hearing actually on the show right now, the rain is absolutely lashing against the windows where I have my home studio here in my second bedroom in the Saucon Valley, part of the Lehigh Valley in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in these United States, on planet Earth, which is the third rock from the sun. It is the only planet that we have in the Terran solar system and the Milky Way galaxy in this little universe of ours. I thought I heard it raining earlier when we were finishing up with Shavonnia, and you may have seen me, if you're watching on Facebook, kind of turn around and give a very quizzitive look as if something was bothering me. I thought actually I had started to print something by mistake off of my printer, because I heard this very strange sound even with my headphones on, and it turns out it is a wicked thunderstorm that we're experiencing just now. And thank goodness it has not turned into a power failure, although goodness knows anything is possible. There's something interesting thing popped up over there. That's not what I thought it was. I thought it was a call. It is not. 267-227-9189 if anyone wants to ring in. If no one does, before maybe, oh goodness, I don't know, 8:15, we'll say goodnight. There's been a very dramatic spike in coronavirus cases across the nation, but specifically in the south and western red states that were quick to force reopenings in their economy, open restaurants and bars, and states that currently are the home or planning to be the home base for most professional sports, and that are planning to have schools open up normally in the late summer, early fall. Right, yes, I saw that this morning. There's 1,000 cases actually, I thought it was 10,000. It was over 1,000 cases in Florida yesterday. Just yesterday, over 1,000 cases, and most of the large cities in Florida, ER spaces are maxed out. There is already a shortage of ER room space in Florida. You are seeing a shortage of ER space in the city of Houston, in Texas, is maxed out. The other large cities are getting close. Arizona is maxing out ER space. You are seeing, and these are the states where professional sports are supposed to be, home basing themselves. I was watching the MLS return tournament last night there at Disney World, at Wide World of Sports in Disney World. The NBA is supposed to be hosting or home basing itself at Disney World, and yet Florida is this major hotspot for coronavirus. So that's interesting. You have that. You have the. What do you think that the UK, even as it separates itself from the EU because it wants to control its own money, has yet decided that it's going to spend tremendous amounts of money to reopen its economy, even as it sees cases on the rise, as it opens its economy? It seems to me that one of the interesting things about this virus, and I am no doctor, I do not pretend to be one, I don't play one on TV, I would never fake such a very important thing, is that one of the very tricky things about this virus is how much we do not know about it. When the virus first started in this country, one of the very first things we were told about it is that it doesn't affect young people. Now we see cases beginning to spike among young people. Among the different things that we see among the lasting effects appear to be brain scarring, lung scarring. There are people who get it, they test positive for it, and have zero, none. They're completely asymptomatic. Some people get it and they're hospitalized within days. We were originally told that when people go on a ventilator, they never come off. Some people now go on ventilators and they do end up being cured. I think that's one of the things that people are perhaps misunderstanding about this thing is how much we do not know. And yet that's part of science. That's all part of science, is that we study, we think we know something, and it ends up being incorrect because we learn. We learn as we go. We study things. So there's that we could discuss. There was also, and for the local listeners, the listeners who were a little closer to home here in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, there was a very disturbing protest last night, spontaneous and disturbing protest last night at the Allentown Police Department. I watched all of it, if not a lot of it, nearly all of it, live on social media. I actually believe that for as much of it as I could see, because the video tended to cut off rather abruptly, that the protest was rather skillfully diffused by both the mayor and the chief of police. I know there's a lot of folks who probably won't appreciate or agree with that opinion, but certainly the video I saw made it look that way. The protesters were angry. They had a right to be angry. They appeared to want to storm the police station. They did not. That was pretty damn smart. They then blocked a street. That was pretty okay and was relatively uneventful considering it was midnight. Nobody was really on the streets anyway. They were able to gather themselves a lot of youth with them by simply getting on social media and saying, everybody come on out. We're having a protest. Not dissimilar from saying, come on out, folks, we're having a spontaneous concert or barbecue in the middle of the street. That was, at best, troublesome. And again, to be fair, I can only go by what I was watching being streamed on social media. It was one person's perspective by what he could show me on the phone. And it was organized, I should say, rather quickly. It gave the appearance of being spontaneous. I'm forced to wonder whether it was spontaneous. It definitely gave that appearance of being spontaneous, but I do not know if it really was. Heck, some of the friends that I saw some of the people that I saw on camera were my friends. Some I've worked with. But it was disturbing. It was concerning. There were good, decent human beings out there that were angry. They wanted answers. And I have to say that at a point, April's giving me notes I'm trying to read. Yes, April is handing me notes that's saying that it could have gone pear-shaped, it could have gone sideways very quickly, and she's 100% correct. Whenever you get folks, angry young folks, at midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, on a hot summer's night when it's super humid outside, it could go pear-shaped very, very quickly. 267-227-9189 is the phone number. 267-227-9189. It could have gone pear-shaped really quickly because it only takes one person to make it go pear-shaped. And there were times during the video that I saw that I'm not so sure somebody didn't want it to go pear-shaped. And I am super, super, super glad that it didn't. And again, I'm coming at it from a very different perspective. If you're watching on Facebook, you can see what I look like. I did not grow up the same way that a lot of people in that protest grew up. Even April, who's sitting here with me, we grew up very, very differently. We have a lot of, if not all, of the same political points of view and perspectives and so on, but we grew up very differently. So I know that I come at this from a very different point of view, or at least a very different starting point. But what happened last night was that close to getting ugly. It was that, nobody's going to hear you. Do you want to come around here? It was that close to getting ugly. And I'm thrilled that it didn't. The part of the video that everyone has seen online, and if you have not seen it online, it's pretty easy to find at this point. I imagine if you just did a DuckDuckGo or Google search of Allentown police video, I'm sure you'll see it. It's damning video. It's ugly video. But there are some questions as to whether that is the entirety of the incident. But if you see it, it will anger you. And it's very easy to see why it will anger you. But is that the entirety of the incident? We do not know that yet. And like I said, I know that there's some folks that will be, George is telling me we didn't have the mic for you. He's right. If anybody would like to buy one, they're welcome to have at it. It ain't a budget. But if you watch the video of the protest, I would encourage folks, regardless of where you might be watching the program, or whether you're listening to the program on hot101.net at the main website or through the app, wherever you're listening, we're thrilled that you're here and we appreciate that you're here. I would encourage you to do both. I would strongly, strongly encourage you to do both. Use DuckDuckGo. That's a website that does not trace your search history. They do not keep a search history on you. It works the same as Google, except that they do not keep any of your information, and they do not sell it, and they do not keep a search history on you. It's DuckDuckGo, just like it sounds, DuckDuckGo. Or you can Google. And then watch the protest. That's about a 40-ish minutes. The police are gathering body cam videos that need to be reviewed. That's the Allentown Police Department. I'm getting pinged, and there's all sorts of dings and shit going on. What is all that? And I just said a word I shouldn't have said, so you can get me for that. And the person was at the hospital. The person the Allentown police are arresting in the video, when you see it, was becoming combative. So you're seeing only part. The video that you see is not the entirety of the incident. You only see the end bit. You don't see the doctors and the nurses trying to deal with the gentleman as he's being arrested by the. You see his interactions, I guess, is a mild word for it. It's not, interactions is really not the right word for it, but you see the police dealing with him. You do not see him dealing with the doctors and nurses at the hospital. Let's put it that way. 267-227-9189. But I encourage you to look up the video. And then I encourage you to watch what is a long video of the protests in Center City, Allentown last night, because it could have gone a lot of different ways. And I am thrilled, really genuinely happy that it did not go, past a point where it would not come back. So just watch it, because in the context of all of the things that we are dealing with in the country right now, it's an important part of the story. I think it's an important part of the story, because there have been a myriad of Black Lives Matter protests inside the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, just like there has been across the country. So wherever you are watching or listening right now, Facebook or the main hot101.net website or the Hot 101 app, thank you for being here, Hot 101 family. We're thrilled that you are here. We're thrilled to be a part of the Hot 101 family and thrilled that you are with us. This is the Kennedy Effect for July 12, 2020. 267-227-9189 is the phone number if you want to dial in, ask a question, and join the program. If we do not get any calls relatively soon, we are going to say goodnight to you for the night. 267-227-9189. If you do not have the Hot 101 app, you can get it. You can download it easy and for free at the Google Play or the Apple App Store. It is super simple and super easy to use. You can get the app at wherever you get your apps. It is super easy to find and very easy to download. Downloads in an instant, and it is super easy to use. That is the hot101.net app, wherever you get your apps and wherever you find them. I happen to have all Apple devices. It was easy for me to find and download. If you have Android devices, you go to the Google Play Store, I believe it is. I don't use Android, but if you do, it is the Google Play Store. Super easy to find, and I am humbled and very, very happy to be part of the hot101.net family. I could not do it without DJ Alexis, DJ Earl, and of course my friend, my partner, mentor, spirit guide, and sometimes psychiatrist, April Riddick, who is here with me in the home studio. I'm thrilled to be part of the family. If you are a regular hot101.net listener, this is it's a new direction a little bit for hot101.net. Our job here, our goal here is to inform, to educate, and to get you engaged. You might hear a lot of other types of political talk. You might hear a lot of other maybe you're not used to listening to political talk. Maybe political talk is not something that you generally engage in, but give us a chance. Just give us a listen. I think you will find it to be different. I am not here to talk at you. I am not going to yell. I am not going to call people names. We are not going to argue. We are not going to scream here. We are here to have a discussion. We are here to educate. We are here to put the issues of the day into a historical context. We are here to explain the terms that are shouted at you on a daily basis and put them into a context that you will understand, that you can then turn and have meaningful discussion with your friends, your family, your coworkers, the crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, folks like that. This is not, if you are used to right-wing hate radio, this is the antithesis of that. We are not going to scream at you. We are not going to argue. We are not going to call each other names. That is not what we're here for. We are here for meaningful, measured, proper conversation. And we hope that you have enjoyed the program tonight. We're at 8:15. We don't seem to be having any calls in, so we're probably going to say goodnight for tonight. But listen, this is something I started doing radio and television when I was in high school. Those days are a long time ago. Actually, human beings even saw in black and white back then. We didn't even use our eyes for color back then. It's that long ago. We used stone tablets to talk to each other. It's been a long time. And this has been a dream of mine to engage my fellow human beings in measured, educated, intelligent discussion. And that is what we are trying to do here. I know that it is new and different for Hot 101. If you are a regular Hot 101 listener, you might be thinking to yourself, what the heck is this? Give us a chance. Listen, Hang in there. Stay with us. I believe you will enjoy the program. I truly, truly do. And it doesn't always have to be heavy political talk. If you're watching on Facebook, I'm in my Man United jersey. United is undefeated in 16 straight, by the way, and we are going to qualify for a Champions League spot. I'm very confident of that. We can even talk about that if you want. Major League Baseball returns in 2 weeks, by the way. The Yankees will be on the field. They open up the shortened Major League Baseball season in Washington, D.C. against the Nationals before returning home to Yankee Stadium. It doesn't always have to be heavy, terrible talk. The launch, I posted an article on that other side of information today that the launch window to launch space vehicles to Mars opens up this week. I want to say it was Wednesday or Thursday. You'll find it on our Facebook page, that other side of information article from The Guardian. The launch window to Mars opens up this week. It is the planetary alignment where the shortest distance to launch vehicles to Mars opens up. The United States, EU, even the United Arab Emirates and China all are sending vehicles to Mars to examine the red planet and look for life. We can talk about things like that. It's about elevated discussion. It's about human discussion. It's about friendly discussion. Maybe you're a Republican and you think everything I have to say is a load of bollocks. That's fine too. Let's talk about it. There's no problem. Let's have a discussion. Maybe we won't agree at the end of the conversation. That's okay too. We all, at the end of the day, want the same things. In my mind, it's as simple as that. At the end of the day, we all want the same things. Whether you are as pale and white as I am, or Hispanic, or Black, or Asian, or Polynesian, or whatever you might be, or if you're from Mars, you generally all want the same thing. You want to be safe, you want to be happy, you want to be healthy, you want your kids to be safe and happy and healthy. You'd like to have enough money to take care of yourself, or if an emergency crops up, you can take care of it. You want to have safe schools. You want to have a decent class size. You'd like the car to run in the morning so you can get to work. I mean, there's just basic, simple things, and our country does not function that way anymore. So what can we do to make it better? And we won't agree on all of those things, but let's talk about it. Let's learn about the policies that have worked before. Can we do them again? How do we do them? We can get there. So for all of our friends and our new family at hot101.net, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. We will be back next week, 5 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern US time, because we have listeners all around the world. 5 p.m. Eastern time in the United States, the Eastern Seaboard. We will be back next week. For everyone on Facebook, you know where we are, 5 p.m. Eastern time on all throughout the groups and pages that we generally share to. Our homepage on Facebook is That Other Side of Information. Most everything that you can find there will be at Our Revolution Pennsylvania and hot101.net Facebook page as well. If you do not have the hot101.net app, you can find it for free at the Apple App Store and Google Play, I think is where you get the Google apps. Again, I don't use Android, so I'm not familiar with Android very much, but it's the Google Play Store, I'm pretty certain, and it's free there as well. So I will sign off for now. No one called again. I'm really bummed when nobody calls, I gotta be honest. I desperately want to do a call-in program because I'm not going to be able to get super, super great guests like this every single time. But anyway, George told me the launch window is July 30th to August 15th. So it's not this week, it's in 2 weeks. The launch window opens up to Mars. And that'll be an interesting thing to talk about because, you know, these planetary bodies are in motion and you want to launch when they're at the shortest distance between Earth and Mars. It saves on fuel. It makes it less costly. And you can put more weight actually on the rocket because then you need less fuel and so on and so on and so on. It's actually a really, really interesting, cool thing to think about. And we can do these things too, because you'll get people that'll say, well, why are we launching things that cost billions and billions of dollars to Mars when we can't feed people here? Look, we're smart. Human beings are smart. We can do two things at the same time. We can walk and chew gum. I know that's a really cliche old thing to say, but it's true. We can do two things. We can explore a planet that some scientists believe we actually came from, and cure the ills that plague us as a society here on this planet. We can do two things. And remember, it's the study of what we've learned that's happened to the atmosphere of Venus that tells us we're doing to Earth's atmosphere. So scientific exploration, space exploration is not a wasted endeavor. Trust me. Anyway, I said I was going to go, so I'm going to go now. I will let you all go. A really, really important, and I mean this, I know I've said it 100 times during this show, but it really is important to me. This is my first weekend, my first show on hot101.net, both the main website and the app. I'm thrilled to be part of the family. I could not do this without DJ Lexus, DJ Earl, and of course, April Riddick. I'm thrilled to be here. We shall return. You can find me and all things The Kennedy Effect on Facebook at That Other Side of Information. That is our home group page on Facebook. It is currently a private group, he said. He tried to say.
It's public. It's a public group. You just have
Yeah, but you have to ask to be a member of it. So it's you'll see stuff from it, but you have to ask to be a member of it. Come and join us. We add members all the time. You'll find news, great news articles there, easy to read articles there related to what we do, show material about. You'll have show announcements there. Our expected guest next week is the guest we were supposed to have this week, which is Cole Goodman. And then we are working on guests for future weeks. Huh? Oh, and our young contributor to That Other Side of Information, Grant Pinsley, 13 years old blogger who blogs on really serious topics, like takes super adult, proper topics, breaks them down. If you have younger folks in your family, high school and younger folks in your family, he blogs about super serious stuff, makes it, it's proper stuff. And he's an apprentice. Well, he's really more than an apprentice for the show, because frankly, I want to hand him the Twitter, let him do that stuff. I can't stand that Twitter thing. But then, so there's that. We're still working on eventually getting onto the getting the YouTube and or Periscope going as well. And frankly, Grant can have that, so he can tell me how to work that. I don't want nothing to do with it. Just tell me where to punch a button and I'll be there. But at some point, all of this gets overwhelming. So we will return next week. Sunday, that will be July 12 and 7 is 19. The 19th, 5 p.m. Eastern time in the U.S. for our global listeners on Hot 101. 5 p.m. Eastern time in the U.S., Eastern Seaboard of the U.S. for all our global Hot 101 listeners. We will be back on all of our Facebook platforms as well as hot101.net. Again, big, huge thanks and gratitude for everyone at hot101.net. This is just the beginning. DJ Lexus, DJ Earl, and April, thanks to everyone at hot101.net. If you are a hot101.net listener, or you are not yet a hot101.net listener, you can listen through their main website page at, surprise, surprise, hot101.net, or you can get the hot101.net app at the Apple App Store or Google Play for free. And if you continue and choose to listen on Facebook, you are welcome to do that too. We are still there as well. You can listen to the hot101.net Facebook page as well. I invite you to visit that too. You can see all of the, you can actually see and listen to all the different programming at hot101.net on their Facebook page as well. All the great DJs that spin and do tremendous music all over hot101.net. If you actually want to see what they're doing, go to the Facebook page. You can see everything right there too. It's brilliant. It's a great Facebook page. It's a great escape. When the world's getting you down, it's a great escape to go to hot101.net Facebook page. If you don't, if listening to the music is not enough for you and you want to see what the DJs are actually doing, go to the hot101.net Facebook page. You can see everything there. It's a great Facebook page. I encourage you strongly to go there and, throw your cares away for a little while, relax, and visit the Facebook page. So for April, For DJ Alexis, for DJ Earl, thank you so much for being here for this week and for my super, super excellent, could not have been greater. Thank you, last minute, yet still gave me 3-hour guest, Shavonnia Corbin-Johnson. My thanks to everyone. And from my humble second bedroom home studio here in the Saucon Valley, part of the Lehigh Valley, and a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, part of these United States, on planet Earth, third rock from the sun, the only planet we have, part of the Terran solar system in this Milky Way galaxy, in this little old universe of ours. Thank you for being with me, and we will see you next week. Take care of yourselves, and please take care of each other. See you next week.